We back, y'all. Live once again. Come on in. All my peoples. Let's get back to work. Let me do my thing. Let me summons and send out the bat signal. Well, I see one of my mods in here. Let's get it. Let's get that chat popping. Smash that like button, y'all. As you come in, we did great. We just got 200 likes on a live stream. Where Infinite at? Smash that like button, y'all. We back in the building. Double tap that screen when y'all get up in this joint. Let's get right to it. Let's get it, y'all. Double tap, double tap.
At Brynhilder Academy, power decided everything.
Is he still trying? That's almost sad.
Welcome back to Midas Defense. I'm Chris Goldsmith, Army combat veteran, president of Valor Media Network, and executive producer of Hellcats. America loves to talk about honoring those who serve. But the real test of that promise isn't what politicians say at parades or on Veterans Day. It's what they do when service actually costs something. Right now, American troops are fighting in an increasingly costly war with Iran that Congress never authorized. At least 18 American service members have been killed as of this recording. In the first week or so after the supposed ceasefire ended in July, over 100 more had been wounded. And the Pentagon says it has already spent more than $37 billion on this conflict. Now, the Trump administration is asking Congress for tens of billions of dollars more, while diverting money away from training, maintenance, and weapons programs just to keep this war going. And the deficits that they're creating now will impact our national security for a decade or more. At the same time, Republicans in Congress recently pushed legislation that could have reduced disability compensation for future veterans with conditions like tinnitus and sleep apnea. And when the veterans of foreign wars fought back, 2 Republican congressmen asked the VA to investigate the VFW's accreditation, the very accreditation that allows them to represent disabled veterans to get the benefits that they earned from the VA. Meanwhile, at the Pentagon, Pete Hegseth is blocking exceptionally qualified women from promotion into the Navy's senior ranks, including trailblazing officers who have already commanded at the highest levels. while finding time in the middle of a war to launch a new testosterone testing initiative. There's a common thread here. A country cannot demand sacrifice from people and then treat its obligation to them as optional. As Maura Sullivan puts it in this episode, a nation that cannot afford to take care of its veterans cannot afford to go to war. But this conversation also goes somewhere bigger. Service to this country has never belonged exclusively to those of us who wore a uniform. It happens in classrooms, hospitals, nonprofits, disaster zones, neighborhoods, and communities across America. And at a moment when so much of our politics is organized around what divides us, Maura and Rebecca make the case that rebuilding a culture of service might actually help bring us back together. Because the question shouldn't always be, what can I get? Sometimes it needs to be, what can I do? Here are Marine Corps veteran Maura Sullivan and Navy veteran Rebecca Bennett with episode 5 of Hellcats.
Pete Hegseth gave us a lot of material to talk about this week.
Oh my God.
And so it's really an embarrassment of riches, I would say. Maybe just more an embarrassment. But yeah, so first thing I want to, talk to you about is, so folks didn't see this in the news, Pete Hegseth blocked yet another group of senior women admirals from getting promoted. So there were 7 senior Navy officers, 5 of whom were women or people of color. And this now means for the first time in more than a decade, no active duty female naval officers are going to get promoted to admiral. And I'll just say, for me, this is really personal. So one of the women that is getting blocked is Rear Admiral Bauer Schmidt. She's a fellow helicopter pilot. She was the first woman that was able to command an aircraft carrier, which is an incredible responsibility. It's a 6-year training pipeline in order to be able to get to the position of being the CEO of an aircraft carrier. And so, we're just continuing to see this assault on women. What kills me about this is, in order to be the first, you have to be exceptional. And so the idea that we are taking these incredibly badass women that are incredible leaders, incredible trailblazers, and sidelining their careers just makes me so angry. But yeah, I would love to hear, what you think, what your reaction was.
Yeah, I mean, I had just a very similar reaction. First of all, I mean, this is not about, as we both know, this is not about what gender somebody is or what somebody looks like. This is about, Pete Hegseth is making our nation less safe. It's like he is so out of touch with this. He's so out of touch with the reality of warfighting and what it means to be on the front lines of our nation's fights and what actually matters, and it's having the best talent, period.
I knew the injection would kill me. My score said so, and I still took it. The divine serum. 1 injection.
Well, speaking of other ridiculous things that happened this week, basically, we both thought this was a joke when we saw it first, but Pete Hegseth put out a video that he called the High T Department of War, and they are now mandating that everyone over 30 has to get tested for testosterone. And I legitimately, going back to military readiness, like, what is even the point of this? How much is it going to cost? How much time is this going to take? I mean, it's going to be a massive undertaking for us to be able to do this, but it's also just really beyond parody. I mean, I just legitimately cannot even believe that it was real. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. And also, by the way, my reaction when I saw this was, hey, we're at war. Maybe we should focus on that. Maybe we should focus on ending the conflict in the Middle East and not doing these ridiculous...
Exactly. I mean, what sort of tone does this set in the department? What does this do to morale? What the heck sort of, signal does this send again to women in the department? But again, the most salient part all comes back to, it's not like because it's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. It is a distraction from fighting and winning our nation's wars. To your point, we are at war in the Middle East right now. We've had lots of discussions about whether we should or shouldn't be, but we are. And, if his 11 a.m. on a Tuesday in the Pentagon is about testosterone testing as opposed to, the strategy to degrade Iran's nuclear capability, then he's focused on the wrong things.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing, too, we see significantly higher infertility rates for women in the military than we've seen in the general population. IVF is still not covered under the VA, but erectile dysfunction medication is. And so I think it just continues to be this double standard of why are we spending time on this when we have women, veterans, and other people that need access to healthcare. But yeah, to your point, it's absolutely not the right thing that he should be prioritizing. He needs to be focused on making sure that our military has what they need, and also that they're bringing an end to this conflict that we're seeing in the Middle East.
I had that thought as well with the recent threatened cuts to disabilities, or threats with disabilities at the VA.
Yep.
The still lack of coverage for fertility with female veterans, and I'm sure keep coming back to something that is a really important sort of statement I think to make, which is a nation that cannot afford to take care of its veterans.
Yes.
Cannot afford to go to war.
At the time of this recording, the legislation got pulled off the House floor, but the act itself was the Taking Benefits from America's Veterans Act. And basically the idea was that they were going to combine the Major Richard Starr Act with a couple of other things. And one of the things that would have been an outcome of this is that we would have seen veterans lose access to their disability benefits for tinnitus and sleep apnea. And, I have a disability rating with the VA. And one of the things I have a disability rating for is tinnitus, because helicopters are very loud.
Yeah, yeah.
And being on an aircraft carrier is very loud.
Really loud.
And so I have hearing damage, like I do, and it comes up all the time. And so it's one of those things that we should not be taking benefits away from other service members to pay for benefits for other service members. So, I was glad to see that the bill got pulled off the floor, but I just think it's one of those things that this is why we need people in office that really have experienced this stuff and can be able to speak to it and give it credibility. But yeah, I mean, it's just, it's exactly what you said, which is that if we can't pay for people when they come home, then, what are we doing?
Can't afford it.
Yeah.
Like plain and simple. And I was also very glad to see that bill pulled. And but it is so telling and frustrating that it got as far as it did in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean, you're potentially cutting disability benefits from veterans is pretty sick and twisted. And those are benefits that that our brothers and sisters in service earned, and we need to ensure that they can access them, period.
Yeah, it was also going to increase the funding for a GI Bill too. I mean, there was a bunch of stuff that they kind of like looped in there. So I'm glad that they pulled it. I mean, but I do think it's important that we continue to fight for this stuff for our veterans and service members for sure. And then the other thing that's just kind of in the news right now, I sound a little congested right now, but part of that is because I'm in New Jersey and we are having terrible air quality here because of the forest fires that are going on in Canada. I mean, this is the thing of what we're seeing with climate change, is that it's impacting our ability to have our kids go outside and play and make sure that, somebody on my team has asthma and they were saying that they're really getting impacted by this. And so this is, when we talk about climate change, like this is what we're talking about is, just the impact.
In our community, we also see other signs of climate change damage. Our beaches here on the New Hampshire seacoast, we've seen erosion on the beaches. We saw flooding in one of our downtown parks. And, I as a veteran, I think a lot about climate change as a threat to national security. And we have here, our Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, which is literally down the street from where I'm sitting right now, which is part of the $100 billion, of course, of coastal assets within the Department of Defense, which are under threat from rising sea levels. One of many, many threats to national security that is, something that we have to be incredibly vigilant about and build up resilience to.
To your point, I think it's also about we need to make sure that we're investing in grid, modernization, resiliency, that we're really making sure our infrastructure is prepared for the more severe storms that we're going to see right now because of what we're seeing with climate change. So it's absolutely something that we need to do. And it's absolutely a national security threat because all the Navy bases are famously by the water. And so, we need to make sure that we still can use them.
Well, I was, on that note again of climate change as a threat to national security, I was really proud to be in the Pentagon team in 2015, which was the first time that climate change was included in the NSS, the National Security Strategy, as a threat to national security, and worked for the Secretary of the Navy and the Navy Marine Corps team. And one of the things that I was really proud that we did was introduce what was called the Great Green Fleet, which was introducing biofuels to
Wait,
fleet
did
of
I
Navy
tell
ships
you?
around the world.
I flew with the Great Green. I flew with this. Did I
I
tell you
didn't
this?
know that. You're kidding
Yeah,
me.
I did. Yeah, I did. It was during RIMPAC, which for folks that are watching, it's like one of the,
Yes.
I think it's the biggest naval exercise in the world. If not, it's one of the biggest. And you basically have all these countries, and we go out off the coast of Hawaii and do a bunch of stuff. But yeah, I flew with the Great Green Fleet. I had the stickers on the side of my helicopter. It was like a whole
That is
thing.
so
It was
cool.
very
I
exciting.
can't believe we
Yeah.
never figured that out before this. What?
We want to talk about this idea of service today. And, I think what ideas and moments of service that we've had in our community that inspire us and that, you're proud of. And so, and I think just this idea of how we can continue to be of service in our country and not necessarily just military service, but thinking more broadly about how can we get more people involved and, being able to serve.
I think the role that service has played in each of our lives and certainly leading us to what we're doing now and how transformative it has been. And one of the things in this challenging, I guess is the word, environment that we face in our country that I think gives me so much hope in terms of the country moving forward and bringing people together is the idea of expanding national service. And I think of it as sort of the triple bottom line, if you will. Like there's three great things happen. The individual who can earn money for college by, being willing to serve, not only has that opportunity for themselves, but is transformed by serving. And then second, our communities gain these young leaders and the next generation of leaders at, nonprofits, in schools or in medical clinics or in, clean tech jobs within our communities around our country. And then third, and kind of the highest level is that, our country gains a better culture of civic responsibility. And, what can I do for our country? What can we do for our country as opposed to, what's next for me? And I think America could use a little bit of that right now.
Yeah. No, I love it. I mean, I think for me, I totally agree. And I think it's this idea of if we can get people out of their bubbles and get to know people, I think that's one of the beauties of the military is truly this mixing pot of people from all over the country and all backgrounds and all walks of life. And so the idea of being able to get more people to go be part of something bigger than they are, get to know people from different parts of the country, and to be able to do that mission-driven work, I think is just incredibly important. And I think it's a great opportunity.
Maura and Rebecca leave us with a simple challenge. Don't just point at what's wrong. Decide how you're going to help make it better.
The U.S. is funding this genocide where so many people and guys.
There's a growing rift in the Democratic Party, and you saw it this past week when 6 Democrats, some would argue strategically, i.e. at the direction of Democratic leadership, voted with Republicans to pass a $1.5 trillion defense spending package and advance the House National Defense Authorization Act Amendment 219 that, if successful, would merge Israel's military with ours forevermore, essentially. Hi, my name is Suri Crow, and you're watching the Midas Touch Network. House Minority Leader and Speaker hopeful Hakeem Jeffries has long been in Israel's pocket.
Congress will continue to support in a bipartisan way the state of Israel and Israel's unequivocal right to exist as a Jewish and democratic state always and forever. Always and forever. Always and forever.
And after receiving one of his largest AIPAC donations ever this year, he voted against cutting further aid and funding arms to Israel, despite 100 Democrats in his caucus breaking ranks and voting to stop the arms and money flow to Israel.
Did you oppose cutting aid to Israel, given that so many people are saying that the U.S. is funding this genocide where so many people in Gaza have been murdered?
I think that I laid clearly out the reasons that I both voted no on the Massey Amendment and the things that I believe need to be done in order to move the relationship with the United States, Israel, and the Palestinian people forward in a far more constructive and productive manner.
There are over 100 Democrats who voted with the Massey Amendment. You were not one of them. Does that mean you're out of step with the direction that this party's going when it comes to...
If you ask me a serious question, I'll give you a serious answer.
Way to be for those two reporters just hounding him. That's how every politician and lawmaker who is currently supporting Israel should be treated right now. Question them, hold their feet to the fire. Absolutely. Way to go. Now, all of this, he's doing this, even though the ICC has named Benjamin Netanyahu a war criminal, and a UN independent commission recently determined that Israel is committing genocide by deliberately targeting Palestinian children. Here's what New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani recently had to say about Netanyahu.
Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal, the architect of a horrific genocide against the Palestinian people. He is responsible for the killing of more than 73,000 people, for the maiming of tens of thousands of children, as those who survive undergo amputation without anesthesia, for the targeting of neonatal hospitals and maternity care centers, denying newborns even the chance to live, for the countless people he starved as he blocked food and humanitarian aid from reaching them, for the gunning down of hundreds of aid workers and journalists. And just last month, the UN confirmed that Palestinian children continue to be deliberately targeted and killed by Israeli armed forces, more than 8 months after the so-called ceasefire.
And yet, fellow New Yorker Hakeem Jeffries, when he was pressed about Mayor Mamdani's comments, he refused to agree with not only the mayor, but also with the International Criminal Court itself.
Do you agree with Zohran Mamdani's position that the federal government should comply with the ICC's arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
I haven't talked to him about this issue. He's been very vocal on the issue. I continue to maintain the position that, one, we've got to figure out how to move things in a better direction in the Middle East.
Welcome to Frozen Barbecue. Please remain calm and hungry. Customer patience.
In a recent post where Jeffries condemned the war in Iran, and let me remind you why we are at war with Iran right now. It is because of Israel. It's because we are effectively being led through the nose by Israel. We're now just like Israel's puppet. He was effectively ratioed in the comments section. Here's the post he put out, or one of his staffers likely did. Jeffries writes, Operation Epic Failure has been named a disaster for the American people. Donald Trump's reckless war of choice in Iran must end immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And then somebody writes, you know what else has been an epic failure? Your weak and feckless leadership. And this person writes, you are Netanyahu's puppet. You are no better. Tutors Reimagine writes, Operation Epic Failure is what we all call you, APAC guzzler.
Y'all always talking about spewing BS. But they all facts. And you never have shit to dispute anything that you see or hear on YouTube or TikTok. What you always say is spewing garbage. Where is the shit that you're talking about that is in opposition to the things I'm talking about? Please tell me. Because the garbage thing is not working.
Somebody else says, why don't you do your fucking job then? Quit attacking progressives like the people's mayor and attack Republicans, asshole. Megan Twee writes, then you should have voted to stop sending aid to Israel. And the comments just go on and on. I mean, there were thousands. He just got fully ratioed. And it's like this every time he posts. He gets far more hate than he ever gets support, as opposed to somebody like Senator Chris Murphy or somebody like that. And then there were some posts that were referring to Hakeem reportedly making a tense phone call recently to progressive and independent Senator Bernie Sanders, telling him to, quote, stop meddling in the primaries, particularly one involving a black incumbent in North Carolina in such a critical midterm election. And New York Representative Greg Meeks, also a Hakeem ally, said, quote, this he's referring to Senator Sanders, quote, he seemed not to care, which I think is so funny. Sanders is like, shoot, get out of my face, Hakeem Jeffries. I'm not listening to your bullshit. And it's funny that Hakeem allegedly got angry over a candidate of color Because when Missouri Rep. Cori Bush and fellow New Yorker Representative Jamal Bowman, both black incumbents, lost after AIPAC spent more than $15 million to oust them from Congress, Jeffries didn't seem to give a shit then. Funny how that works, huh? But if you're in the AIPAC pro-Israel pocket, then suddenly it's an issue about color. I mean, the hypocrisy is rich, Rep. Jeffries. So this rift, it appears that it's not only Republicans, obviously, they're all in on fascism, they're all in on Israel, they're just fascist. But Democratic leadership appears to be losing touch with the base, and that leaders like AOC, Bernie Sanders, Mamdani, Milot Kiros, who's the candidate in Colorado who just defeated a longtime incumbent, and more progressive leaders have a better.
This summer, great sleep begins with Raymore and Flanigan's Summer Sleep Deals.
I asked my husband, when did you get so big? His confidence hits different with Rougiette Ready. It dissolves under his tongue, works in 15 minutes on average, and can last for up to 36 hours. Rougiette Ready is the first ED.
It's clear by now that Donald Trump will try every avenue he can to try and interfere in the upcoming election. Now it seems like he's got the Supreme Court hooked into this. Mark, can you explain what the new news is for voter suppression as far as the Supreme Court is concerned?
Yeah, the Department of Justice has filed an emergency appeal in the United States Supreme Court. This will go to the so-called shadow docket because obviously the justices are not around for the summer. They're off doing whatever they do. And this is over a case that was filed in Massachusetts by 23 Democratic attorneys general to block Donald Trump's second executive order trying to target voting. This is the one in which he's essentially trying to co-opt the Postal Service and the Department of Homeland Security to try to keep people from being able to vote. The department lost at the trial court level. The First Circuit agreed with the lower court, and now the Department of Justice has taken this all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court and asked the Supreme Court to throw out this lawsuit on the grounds that it is not ripe, that essentially it's too early, Brian, to bring this case. Yet you could only imagine what their argument will be if they prevail here, and then the case is brought later.
So just to be clear here, if the Supreme Court does rule that the existing rulings in the Massachusetts District Court and the First Circuit Court of Appeals, if they aren't ripe, that would eliminate all of their rulings against the White House and instead keep as the law of the land the executive order that Trump passed where he seeks to ban mail-in voting. Is that correct?
Yeah, he doesn't ban mail-in voting. So essentially what this executive order did is a few things. First is it required the Department of Homeland Security to work with the Social Security Administration to create this database of citizens, non-citizen, whatever, that they would then send to the states with the implicit threat, you better use this data to screen your own voter rolls, because one of the other provisions is that they are going to prioritize criminal investigations of state officials who allow non-citizens to vote. So you paired together, you could see what's going on there. But the headline provision, the one that you're referring to that most people have latched onto, is that states would be required to send to the U.S. Postal Service a list of all of the voters who they believe are eligible to receive mail-in ballots. They'd have to do that 60 days in advance of the election, and then the Postal Service would not send mail-in ballots to anyone not on that list. And again, the assumption is that DHS and the Department of Justice would screen off of that list or send to the Postal Service names that should not receive mail-in ballots. So that's what the executive order did. What the First Circuit found, upholding the trial court, is that the states, the Democratic states that sued, they have suffered a concrete injury because they have to deal with preparing for elections. And that will include having to prepare these lists to go to the Postal Service. It'll also have to include making preparations for the possibility that, that DHS or the Postal Service won't allow some people to vote. And so that's enough of a concrete injury. The Department of Justice has brought this case to the Supreme Court. And interestingly, Brian, they are not saying that the executive order issued by the president is constitutional. They are not saying that the executive order issued by the president of the United States complies with existing federal law. Instead, what they're saying is, Brian, maybe Mark Wayne Mullen won't actually do the thing that Donald Trump's asked him to do.
Right.
Just maybe Todd Blanche will be like, you know what, Mr. President, we're not interested in your input in who we investigate. And just maybe the Postal Service, notwithstanding the fact that it is currently initiating a rulemaking to do exactly the thing Donald Trump says, maybe then the Postal Service will be like, you know what, White House, we don't care what you think. We're going to carry all the mail-in ballots no matter what. And so therefore, none of this is ripe for legal challenge right now, and it should all be dismissed. And, maybe later, if the Postal Service and DHS and the Department of Justice do the things that the White House has asked them to do, maybe then the Democratic states can sue, or in a parallel case that I've been involved in out of Washington, D.C., the Democratic Party can sue. But we know, Brian, that the administration is going to do exactly what Donald Trump asked them to do. We know that they are taking those steps right now because they're telling us they're taking those steps right now. And we know that the reason why the Department of Justice is hitching its wagon to this ripeness argument is it has no defense on the merits to this. And it will argue when we would later file this lawsuit, when the states would later file this lawsuit, they'll say, oh, you know what? I'm sorry, court, it's too late.
Right.
Purcell, it's too late. We've already made a million preparations based on based on this executive order and based on all these other things. It's too late to not do these things for 2026. So maybe these legal challenges could be in place for 2028, but it's too late for 2026. It's really cynical, and it goes to show just how desperate Republicans and this White House are to make it harder for people to vote and easier for them to cheat.
Well, it's clear if you're a judge and you're hearing this and you're hearing the Trump administration say, well, we don't know that this is set in stone already because maybe the USPS will defy Donald Trump. Maybe the DOJ will defy Donald Trump. Maybe Mark Wayne Mullen and DHS will defy Donald Trump. Don't these judges have discretion, enough discretion to be able to say, well, look, that's complete bullshit. Of course, these people are going to kowtow to Donald Trump. Of course, they're going to be loyal to him. That's their first, second, and third priority in terms of being in his cabinet in the first place. So, can't they use that discretion and not suspend reality in deference to whatever argument the DOJ is making?
See, I think you put your finger on it in that last phrase. I don't think this is a question of discretion. I think this is a question of deploying basic common sense. This is a matter of not being willfully blind. I mean, the Department of Justice wants these judges to close their eyes to reality. I mean, let's start with DA.
I was a mudblood on a train for elite wizards and witches, and they wanted me dead.
Yes. Mark Wayne Mullen.
My neighbor's a cannibal. Andrew Tate still crying in jail, y'all.
Has given several press conferences, including the day after the ridiculous speech that Donald Trump gave in the Oval Office, in which he is railing about how these blue states are allowing non-citizens to vote and how he is threatening. Remember, he was threatening that there would be criminal prosecution if, in fact, these blue states allowed these folks to vote and did not use the DHS voter rolls. The Postal Service has already announced that they are doing a rulemaking to implement this policy. And Todd Blanche, I mean, really? We think Todd Blanche might not follow the directions of the White House in what kinds of criminal cases to prioritize?
Come on, Mark. That's unfair. He did say he loves Donald Trump, and even if he got fired, he would still love him. But other than that, what's there to suggest that this guy is a blind sycophant for the president?
Right. So for the Supreme Court, their choice right now is whether they uphold the First Circuit because they are willing to see reality, to use your words, as it clearly is.
Yeah.
Or whether they are going to put on the blinders that the Department of Justice has asked them to put on and suspend reality and say, oh, maybe there's independence in all of these agencies and they will defy Donald Trump.
Mark, I want to ask about the likelihood of the Supreme Court upholding this, but I want to give a quick note to folks who are watching right now. Obviously, the implications for upcoming elections are hugely important. Mark and his team are the ones litigating this stuff on the front lines in the courts. So if you're looking to support his work, the single best way to do that is to subscribe to Democracy Docket, which is the news outlet Mark founded to focus on everything legal, democracy, voting rights, you name it. This is a great way to amplify his voice, a great way to show some support for his work, and a great way to show some support for the absolutely critical litigation that we're seeing right now. So I'm going to put that link to Democracy Docket right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Back to that question, likelihood of the Supreme Court actually deferring not to the lower court rulings, but to the DOJ when they say, oh, you know, this is not yet ripe, and so the executive order has to be the law of the land.
Look, I like to think that the Supreme Court will not shield itself from what everyone is seeing. And by the way, it's not just what everyone is seeing. It's actually to shield yourself from what Donald Trump and his cabinet regularly tell us.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the whole theory of unitary executive is that Donald Trump gets to direct his administration and they have to follow it. And certainly the sycophantic behavior we see at cabinet meetings, that the statements that we see from Todd Blanche, as you mentioned, that he loves Donald Trump, from Markwayne Mullins, the fact that the Postal Service hopped to immediately, like, I'd like to think that on a 9-0 basis, the Supreme Court would say, this is enough for it to be ripe. Because after all, remember, for it to be ripe, it just has to be enough activity that the states are reasonably acting to counteract it, right? I mean, like the states just, all the states have to say is like, look, we have to spend a dime, a dollar, $10, right? Anything. We have to spend money to prepare for this because it's not remote enough that we can ignore it. And I like to think that the Supreme Court would agree 9-0 that that's the case. I don't think they will agree 9-0. Again, this is on the shadow docket. We may not ever know the exact vote count. But I hope that there is at least a majority of this court that, you know, in the post-Watson world where, you know, the administration, you know, doing the bidding of the RNC, and the RNC in that case tried to cripple mail-in voting, that they'll get what's going on here and they won't allow it. And they will affirm the First Circuit and this executive order will be blocked because, again, like, there's not really much of a debate right now about whether Donald Trump actually has the authority to order these actions. The DOJ is trying to play a shell game in preventing the courts from getting to that question by engaging in this alternate reality.
Well, obviously, a lot to continue focusing on here. Mark, your news outlet, Democracy Docket, has been doing excellent coverage, daily coverage on exactly this. So again, for those who are watching right now, to stay on top of this issue, both subscribe to Democracy Docket, which the link is right here on the screen, and also subscribe to this channel where we'll continue to talk about this issue as we head toward midterms. I'm Brian Taylor Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.
If anyone in this room found out what I was, I wouldn't make it out alive.
Quinn Talon, Squad 3. Is this a joke? Why is a level 1 on Squad 3?
300 heads turned to look at me. I froze. I wasn't a level 1. I was a vampire. And every ability user in this room had been trained to kill things like me.
Wait, hold on. The board just...
This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we've got big news here as the result of your law firm that signals some bad news for Donald Trump. Can you explain what just happened in court?
Oh, this is really bad news for Donald Trump because he wants to rig the 2026 election by forcing Republican states to draw illegal gerrymanders. And we just sued the state.
Forward can help end it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just really hard, though, right? It's really hard because what you see is and this isn't even about Warren Southern. I want you to see what happens to women in this conservative movement, because look what happened with her, okay? She fucking built a identity on not being a feminist. She built an identity on being like this conservative woman. We don't believe the accusers. And then when she gets raped, She's stuck. She can't come forward. No one's going to believe her, right? You know what I mean? And like, dude, this is the trap of conservative women that just sinks all of their battleships, dude. It's like so fucking toxic. Dude, Bryce, I love you, boss. Dude, thank you. And I will see you in a couple weeks. It's always good to see you in here. Big love. And talk to Jenny. All right? She can fucking point you in the direction about that shit you were asking about. But like, you know, this is like conservative women. They get so brutalized. And guys, more than anything, let me just tell you, this is part of the reason why these like grape and abusive men pipelines run so well in the conservative religious political movement, because these women create identities that they can't report it. Okay. So the men know it. And so the men abuse these women. Man, you go to TPUSA events, women are getting graped all over the place. And they literally can't report it. They won't report it because it would ruin them fucking politically. It would ruin their reputation. I mean, Riley Gaines, somebody talked about Riley Gaines. You know what's so funny about Riley Gaines, guys? Riley Gaines making this big deal about Leah Thomas and this trans shit. Riley Gaines, while she was in college, her swim coach at the University of Kentucky was raping her teammates, guys. The whole time she was in college, her fucking teammates were being raped. And she didn't come out of college being like an anti-rape advocate. She came out of college attacking transgender people as though they're some sort of danger to women. And it's like, no, man, there were 10 trans athletes in the NCAA, 10,000 women a year in NCAA colleges report rapes. That's the reported ones. And I'm telling you, like 90% of those are in the conservative fucking circles. Dude, you know, they are broken. Yeah, no, they are broken. But I guys, I'm not going to defend conservative women and I'm not going to let them off of their behavior. But having grown up in a conservative household,
all my friends moved to the city, and maybe they're like me, trying to build something of their own. I just never.
We know that Donald Trump is obsessed with nuclear weapons. Donald Trump has spent years fantasizing about the most destructive weapons that humans have ever created. And now with this growing situation in Iran, weakened international safeguards, the U.S. running out of munitions in Iran, and virtually unchecked presidential authority, one former Trump administration official is warning that Donald Trump may be a single mood swing away from launching nuclear weapons if he gets away with it. Miles Taylor served as senior Homeland Security official during Donald Trump's first term. You might remember him. And he says that Donald Trump then would openly fantasize with advisors about blowing stuff up. Often enough that the defense secretary, James Mattis, would instruct officials, this is Trump's first term, prepare contingency plans for the possibility of a nuclear strike on American soil. Now, that does not mean Trump is preparing to launch a nuclear weapon tomorrow. There is no reporting at this time establishing that. The underlying danger is very real because the American system gives the president huge unilateral authority over nuclear weapons. There is no required congressional vote. There is no Supreme Court review. Military officials must refuse illegal orders, but they can't simply veto a lawful nuclear strike because they think the president is reckless or because they believe the president is acting impulsively. And Trump is once again boasting that he came close to ordering what he called a massive attack on Iran. This follows the deranged proclamation from earlier in the Iran war that a whole civilization will die tonight, which are not the words of someone who's a careful strategist who really understands nuclear rhetoric has to be handled with massive discipline. And they sound like a man intoxicated by the spectacle of destroying stuff and by the idea that he has so much power that he could order it and make it so himself. And Trump has even repeatedly called nuclear weapons the N-word, sort of like, you don't say the N-word, which is the derogatory term about black people, and you're just as careful when we talk about nuclear. It's so volatile, we just call it the N-word. By the way, think about how bizarre that is. He takes a weapon capable of ending human civilization and turns it into this basically a verbal prop, a forbidden word he gets to tease people with. Oh, the N-word. He talks about nuclear war with the sort of vocabulary and mentality of a reality TV host, which of course he is, building suspense for the next segment. And Miles Taylor's theory is Trump is always looking for what's the most powerful thing I can do. I want the biggest executive order, the largest military parade, the most dramatic attack, the most terrifying threat. And nuclear weapons are the ultimate version of that fantasy. Trump is not emotionally stable. He has a very limited attention span. He doesn't read. He doesn't respect human life. All things that should accompany the authority and the ability and the power to launch nuclear weapons. And we have watched him threaten countries on social media and confuse diplomacy with I'm going to dominate you, and treat war like a TV show. And now add the administration's new nuclear energy agreement with Saudi Arabia, which according to Taylor, the deal omits the typical safeguards that you would have, which allow, international inspectors to have access to nuclear sites and all of this different stuff. So Trump is escalating the nuclear rhetoric. He's weakening safeguards. He's more disinhibited than he ever has been cognitively and encouraging proliferation. Most presidents talk about undoing the proliferation, denuclearizing. And Trump is like, let's throw more weapons in the direction of one of the most unstable regions on this planet. Now, if Trump ever issued an illegal nuclear order, I hope patriotic military officers would make the decision to refuse it. Am I being naive? If officials believed that the president had become mentally incapable of safely exercising his authority, every lawful mechanism, including the 25th Amendment, should be activated with no delay to terminate Trump's command authority. Because once a nuclear weapon is launched, there is no correction or apology. And one of the things about a lot of the way the nuclear triad is sort of set up, I recently read a book only about nuclear, and nuclear. It was both actually. Is that we have a lot of these weapons that when launched, they cannot be recalled. And when we launch weapons that cannot be recalled, if you realize you made a mistake or you change your mind, other countries are incentivized also to do exactly what they're doing, which is to keep their weapons pointed at the United States without the ability to be recalled. It gets very ugly, is the point I'm trying to make. These are civilization-altering weapons capable of killing hundreds of thousands of people almost instantly, poisoning generations, and triggering the sort of retaliation that could end modern society. I don't know that there has ever been a stronger argument for requiring more authorization before one person can initiate a nuclear war. And right now, that one guy is Donald Trump with very weak guardrails. And remember, Trump, over the last decade that he's been a political figure, has said to aides and staffers everything from, why can't we bomb Europe? What about bombing Mexico? What about it? It is a guy who does not have the capacity nor the knowledge nor the temperament for what it should take to be president of the United States. We did fail a national IQ test, and we have tens of millions of people who voted for him 3 times. I wish it were different, but it's what it is. And so I hope that if that moment comes, we have a military who's ready to say, hey, this is not something that we can do right now. Thanks for watching. Check out this other video. And if you like our content, make sure to subscribe so YouTube puts our videos in your feed, and subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and Apple.
This is air traffic control. Pick abort flight immediately and
All right, listen, something has changed, and Republicans and Trump are now very worried. And Republicans down the ballot, I believe, are realizing that Donald Trump has destroyed their party. Let me kind of set the stage, which is that for months, Republicans projected a lot of confidence about these midterms. And they are now having a very different sounding conversation. There's a new opinion piece by longtime political analyst Juan Williams, which says that genuine panic is now setting in inside Republican circles. And the fear that is being described in the article isn't just that Donald Trump could become even more unpopular between now and the election. It's that he has tied the entire Republican Party to himself. And so if his prospects decline, if his approval goes down, everybody is going down with Donald Trump. And Trump is currently polling 30% in terms of approval. Even
Nobody asked you if you was thrilled or not, but how's it working out for you?
Lower in terms of the economy in some polls. And Donald Trump has sort of decided to make the entire election a referendum on himself by holding this midterm convention that is going to be held in September. Now look at Donald Trump's behavior. He is not acting like someone heading towards an easy victory. He is sort of endlessly campaigning for, we need the Save America Act, and we need to do this, and we need to do that, and we've got to get rid of birthright citizenship. And he is in a panic to try to do anything that he perceives might save Republicans in November. He's escalating his rhetoric. I think even the midterm convention is a miscalculation. He's so desperate, he's going, what can we do? Let's do a convention, without realizing that the convention will actually put him at the center of these midterms, even though he's not actually on the ballot. Now, the question that I suggest you ask yourselves is, if Republicans really believe they were comfortably ahead, would they be doing things like, for example, not Mitch McConnell, we'll get to that later, MAGA Mike Johnson saying, hey, listen, everything is at stake in these midterms. If we lose these midterms, it's going to be impeachment, it's going to be investigations. If they were confident, they wouldn't be playing that out. They would just be confidently saying, we've delivered for the American people. Here's the list of stuff we've done. It's so good for everybody. We're going to win. So we have a backdrop that is terrible for Republicans. Now, even though there have been individual scandals in different Democratic primaries and other races, in general, Democrats have maintained the advantage in a lot of these generic congressional ballots. And that is happening as Trump's approval numbers keep getting weaker and weaker. And in general, just structurally, history is pretty unkind to the party that controls the White House during the midterm elections. And I believe Trump knows it, and I believe that Republicans know it. Now, over the weekend, Trump referred to Democrats as animals. He described communism as a cancer spreading through the country, even though there is no communism. And I don't really think that that rhetoric even motivates voters. Maybe it doesn't turn them off, but I don't know that it's really a motivator. It's a sign of a campaign that's going, we need to raise the stakes and the temperature as high as possible. And the ways that they're figuring out to do it is to use terms like cancer and communism. The larger problem for Republicans, I think, is the one Trump created for himself, which is that for a decade, the Republican Party has stopped being about conservative policy, restraint of the executive branch. It's simply become about Donald Trump. And if getting involved in private business is what Trump wants and believes he benefits from, then Republicans say we'll abandon our small government principles and we'll do that. If blowing up the deficit rather than reducing it is what Donald Trump wants to do for his pet projects, then Republicans go, I guess we don't really care about fiscal restraint anymore. And we've had a number of election cycles now where candidates have not really been judged in terms of whether they adhere to conservative principles. Like, it's almost a joke when I say that. Candidates have increasingly been judged on how loyal are you to Donald Trump. And the party has really become identified with one person. That is a really effective political strategy when that person is strong, when that person is well liked, when that person is delivering for the population. When they are not delivering, when they are unpopular, when their numbers are slipping, having a party that is identified with one person becomes a huge liability. And so now you've got all of these Republican candidates inheriting Donald Trump's baggage. There's baggage on the economy. There's the Epstein story. There's other controversies. There's corruption, nepotism, cronyism, a free plane, and all this other stuff. And the investigations that are likely to happen if Democrats take the House are going to expose even more of it. So on the one hand, you do have Democrats, as usual, stepping in it. The Plattner situation in Maine has become a huge fiasco. The odds of Republicans holding the Senate have ticked up a little bit, in fact, as these Democratic controversies have grown. But if voters decide that they're unhappy with Trump and they go out there and they take control of the House of Representatives away from Republicans, it's only going to do more damage. Now, in his opinion piece, Juan Williams also argues that Trump's growing focus on election procedures and voter fraud and maintaining control of Congress is all related to, I don't think we're going to win by convincing people we've done really well. If you think that the will of the people is going to be to reelect your party, you don't try to make it even more difficult, particularly for Democrats to vote. And that, I think, is a sign that they all know that they're in trouble. So there's a level of anxiety here that political observers say is indicative of where November is likely going. And regardless of whether you agree with every single prediction, there is a big picture here that we can't ignore, which is Republicans are acting like a party that knows they are likely going to get crushed. You don't hold an unprecedented pre-midterm convention and crank the rhetoric to 11 and spend months talking about election fraud and say, we won't even pass a housing bill. Trump said he won't sign the housing bill unless they get the Save America Act on his desk as well, which is going to clamp down on voting. You don't do that stuff unless you think there's a dangerous situation. Now, the biggest irony of all of this, I think, is that Trump deliberately wanted to turn the Republican Party into the Trump Party. That is the very strategy that could backfire in November. Trump can't run again. He's a lame duck. So the consequences are going to hit the Republican Party. And if we do a good job, if we don't have, Democrats put ridiculous nominees up there and this sort of thing, it could set up for a massive blue wave. Forget about 26 for a second. In 2028, Republicans could quite literally not recover for years if this all plays out in the way that it might. But we've got to make it a reality. And that's the part where sometimes Democrats screw up. Thanks for watching. Check out another one of our videos and make sure to subscribe so YouTube keeps our content in your feed. And if you prefer audio, subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or Apple.
She's in trouble again.
Republicans are now so terrified that they are going to get destroyed in the midterms that they are not doing polling anymore. They're not doing campaign strategy. They're not doing door knocking. They're not doing public policy. They want divine intervention. They are praying. House Speaker Mike Johnson was asked, "Why are you so confident about your chances in the fall?" And he says, "Well, you know why? Because we are praying. It's not because we solved the affordability crisis. It's not because Americans have realized how much we've improved their day-to-day lives. It's because people are praying, and that's what's going to drive us to victory." Let's take a look, and I have a lot to say about this.
The American people can trust House Republicans, the Republican Party, to run this government, and we keep delivering. We're going to do that, run all the way through the tape towards the end of the year, to the end of the year, and I believe for this reason we're going to win the midterms. I'm very bullish about the outcome, and we talk about it all the time. With each passing day, I'm more confident, Tony.
You as you repeatedly say, you exceed the expectations of the pundits. They still don't understand the power of prayer.
That's right. And look, I've been openly saying this. I told a big gaggle of Hill Press reporters yesterday at an event. I said, listen, this is a God thing. It really is. I mean, we have intercessory prayers who are on the ground at the Capitol praying each of these things through. My colleagues know that. They know I believe that, and we're watching it happen. More and more people are understanding there must be something to this, because this is an impossible agenda. But look, this is not a radical thing. It's what the framers of our Constitution did, the founders' generation. They all believed in the power of prayer, the divine hand of providence, as Washington himself, the father of our country, often talked about. And we do well. We're one nation under God. We should remember and govern like that.
I always try to be careful with this sort of thing, because people go, "Oh, David, you're mocking religion and you're mocking prayer." I'm really not. You know, if prayer is useful to people in various contexts, if prayer can offer comfort or community or perspective and a way of processing events that are beyond our control or ability to predict, that's completely fine. I mean, if that's something you want to do, go ahead and do it. This is the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. He was asked, "Why do you believe your party is going to win the election?" And his evidence is people are praying. People are asking God to make it happen. It's not because we've improved people's lives or made affordability more relevant again or any of that stuff. It's just people are praying. And at what point can we call this a form of mental illness? If I told you I was imagine that tomorrow I said, "Hey guys, you know, we're going back and forth. Can Democrats win the House? Can Democrats win the Senate?" I'm increasingly confident Democrats are going to win the entire thing, because I just saw a group of people doing a rain dance. I think everybody would understand that I'm not providing any substantive or real analysis here. And I'm not doing anything if I go, the rain dances are what are going to help us win, most people would also realize that's not going to help us win. Now, Johnson puts a Christian label on the same basic idea, and we have to pretend that that's serious. Now, there's also an obvious logical problem. There are Democrats who also pray. There are Christians who vote for Democrats. There are Jews, Muslims, and members of other religious groups that are praying for completely different outcomes. And presumably, God is not waiting to see which party assembles the greatest prayer team before deciding who's going to control the House and who's going to control the Senate. And what makes the clip so revealing is that his confidence is going up with each passing day as the evidence actually gets worse. Trump's approval is down into the 30s. In some polls, Trump's approval on the economy is in the high 20s. Democrats are leading generic ballots by record numbers, and Republicans are in a position where they either have to defend Donald Trump's war or risk angering Trump about the fact that they're not defending his war. And Trump has screwed these people so badly that they've resorted to prayer to be saved. And they cannot meaningly separate themselves from Trump. If Republican members of Congress, after spending years turning Trump into a quasi-religious figure, told their voters he was chosen by God and protected by God, and God saved him when he was shot, God had Trump turn his head so that the bullet killed some random innocent guy. Wow, incredible what God did. Now they're trapped. And if Trump is destroying their chances, they can't say Trump's crushing us. They have to go with, well, we're praying. We're praying and we're confident that our prayer is going to do this. Maybe they will retain the House, probably not. Maybe they will retain the Senate, probably. You know, there's uncertainty to elections. Districts are gerrymandered and Democrats regularly make mistakes. But if Mike Johnson has actual evidence that Republicans are recovering and on a path to holding the House, he should present it. This is a God thing, is what you say when you have catastrophic numbers and prayer is all you've got left. Boy, are they in trouble. Thanks for watching. Check out another one of our videos and make sure to subscribe so YouTube keeps our content in your feed. And if you prefer audio, subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or Apple.
So CNN is completely in awe of the total implosion of the popularity of the state of Israel. This has been a sight to behold, bro. Every time they do a new poll on Americans' thoughts on Israel, it just gets worse and worse and worse for Israel. So let's start with this here, and we'll break it down as we go.
These races has been Israel, how supportive Democratic candidates want to be of Israel and U.S. aid to Israel. Over the summer, it's been largely seen as a Democratic issue, but it might not just be a party thing.
It is kind of a party thing. It is. It is. It is true that, and you'll see the numbers here in a second, but like a lot of independents think very similar to Democrats on this. And young Republicans are leaning towards how Democrats think on this. But, part of the problem with the Republican Party, among many things, is that they still have like an 80% support rate for Israel, which is like, at this point, it's just beyond astonishing and completely unforgivable. That's like having an 80+% approval rating of apartheid South Africa or Nazi Germany, like years into the crimes, right? So it does kind of break down along partisan lines, although it's not, it's not completely black and white, but let's keep going.
We're talking about Israel's favorability in the United States. In general, there's some big changes.
There are some absolutely huge, mammoth changes, generational changes that we're talking about. I think there are a lot of Republicans, we'll be able to run against these anti-Israeli Democrats once we hit the general election because the general electorate feels very differently from the Democratic base. But the general electorate, look at these numbers on Israel, the net favorability. They're all negative. They're all negative. Ipsos, minus 10 points. Fox, minus 11 points. Marquette University Law School Law poll. Look at that, minus 20 points. Pew Research Center, minus 23 points. Negative, 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 negative. And Gallup earlier this year was also negative. We're not just talking about the Democratic base anymore. We're talking about the general electorate as well.
It's crazy to me that this isn't already the conventional wisdom, right? Like, that just goes to show you how stupid and behind conventional wisdom can be, that, we live in a world where Israel live streamed a genocide and people would scroll their social media and see like arms and legs of toddlers who were blown up, and we fucking paid for it, right? And they're going, I don't know if I should pivot on the issue of Israel. Maybe this is just a far left thing, and maybe it's still the sane, responsible, middle of the road position to support aid to Israel. And it's like, I don't know, how dumb can you be? Like, how disconnected from reality are you? How much of a lemming are you that you need, like, that you would consider that for a second? Like, somebody needs to tell you, hey, this is what you should do on this issue. Like, that's embarrassing. Every rational person and empathetic person looks at the mass slaughter of innocent people and goes, okay, I don't like the government that's doing that, right? Like, simple. Like, are you routinely and repeatedly starving millions of people and mass murdering them and bombing, humanitarian zones and UN buildings and hospitals and schools and like just the most atrocious crimes you can think of? Most people go, I don't like that. I'm against that. But the conventional wisdom was, actually, that's a far left position. Like, I don't know, how dumb are you? What people need to realize is conventional wisdom doesn't actually exist. Like, it's not, whoever's telling you what the conventional wisdom is, they are making it up. They are giving their perception of what's conventional wisdom based on a multitude of things that can change person to person. What if Democrats actually just led with logic and led with common sense and led with humanitarianism? If you do that, all the positions should be really, really clear.
The general electorate has turned against Israel. This is not just a left issue. It is an American issue when it comes to opinions on Israel.
What's the trend line here?
What's the trend line here? The trend line is unbelievable. Look at the trend line here. Compare this to Donald Trump's first term. At this point in Donald Trump's first terms, Israel's average net favorability.
Wow.
You go back here. Look at this. It was plus 51 points. Wow, Johnny says. Wow, Johnny says, because this is wow. Plus 51. It's minus 16 points in the average poll now. That is what, a 67-point shift against Israel in just 8 years.
Have we ever seen something this severe? I'm not sure we have. Plus 51 for Israel in 2018. Minus 16 for Israel now. And this includes the fucking dying boomers who think Jesus is going to return there, so they like Israel. This is just a complete reversal of how people feel. And you know what I think extra pisses people off? We funded the genocide. We funded the war crimes. We fund the terrorism and the apartheid and the rape and the torture. We fund that. And so that's an extra layer of like, hey, you should really be pissed off by this. Like if it's something that's happening and is really far away and it's not covered in the news much and we have nothing to do with it, but there's atrocities, like that sucks, but it wouldn't hit as viscerally, I think, as the fact that we are arming and funding the terrorists doing terrorism to innocent people. And so that probably helps explain a decent amount of this absolute collapse. And by the way, it's so bad that all you had to do, even like mainstream media outlets, they gave it like 1/100th the coverage they should have given the genocide. But even just watching that, there's no way they could spruce it up to make it not sound like comic book villain evil, what Israel was doing. And so even like normies go, oh my God, these people are fucking are unforgivable. They're just the worst people ever.
Israel used to be a consensus issue in American politics, and that was a pro-Israeli position. Now the consensus has actually shifted, and now when it comes to general electorate, it is a minus. Israel is now seen negatively, and we're seeing it in poll after poll after poll.
You just had this vote in the House where 100 Democrats voted against military assistance to Israel. How is that specific issue seen right now?
Yeah, you said wow, right? How about wow again? Take a look here. I never thought I'd see the day military assistance to Israel say U.S. should reduce or end it. Overall, 55% say they should reduce or end it. And it is true across the educational spectrum. 51% of non-college graduates, 62% of college graduates. So this isn't just an issue right among white liberals in Democratic primaries. No, no, no. This is true across the educational divide. Even when we are looking towards a general electorate, the majority of Americans believe that military assistance to Israel should either be reduced or ended.
Democratic politicians need a full and complete divorce from Israel. There's no way around it. No Democratic candidate or politician should take a single penny from the Israel lobby. And I don't just mean from AIPAC. I also mean from DMFI. I also mean from the little AIPAC shell groups where they lie. They create groups called like Elect Chicago Women, and then they lie about what that group does and what they're in favor of. I'm talking a total and complete shutdown of any Israel lobby money going to Democratic candidates. That if a candidate takes a penny of Israel lobby money, they should just be ruled out completely by every single Democratic voter. You should have no interest. The Haley Stevens of the world, who's swimming in AIPAC money, $50 million worth, she should be ruled out instantly. Because at this point, and this is the other point that nobody discusses, right? Let's keep it real. Israel is also MAGA. Let's be honest. You know whose approval rating is super fucking high in Israel? Donald J. Trump. Okay? It's an apartheid ethno-terror state. That's what it is. And you have Netanyahu, he's not subtle about it. He has completely and utterly snuggled up to MAGA, to the Republican Party. He has gone all in on them. So if you're a Democrat and you're taking Israel lobby money and you're doing the bidding of the Israeli government, you are simply MAGA. You are doing the bidding of MAGA. You are saying, I am with the enemy. I am with the other side. And at this point, for obvious reasons, no Democrat should have anything to do. We don't want any MAGA shit. We don't want any diet MAGA shit. In the same way that Democrats are looked at like, don't take motherfucking Wall Street money. Don't take military industrial complex money. right? Like, you shouldn't take any fucking billionaire money, no Epstein class money. You need to add Israel to that list. If you want to be a Democratic politician, it's very simple. You raise through small dollar donations, and in some cases, some of them, if you want to take money from lawyers or teachers or unions and those kinds of PACs, environmental PACs, that's one thing. That's fine, right? Not ideal, but it's fine. But as soon as you start taking military-industrial complex money, as soon as you start taking Israel lobby money and Wall Street money, you're really just showcasing that you're unscrupulous and that you're corrupted and that you actually have no principles. Because, if you're running for office and you take that money, what you're saying is, I'm okay with serving that interest group. And you shouldn't in any way, shape, or form be okay with serving an ethno-state. In no way, shape, or form should you be okay with serving the war machine. In no way, shape, or form should you be okay with serving the billionaire class and serving the corporate world. You should be in there to represent the American people. And the American people have spoken loud and fucking clear. And they're saying, fuck Israel. Fuck Israel, no more to genocide, no more to us arming and funding it. This is not a debatable issue, and y'all need to wake the fuck up. And it's just so crazy that it took this long to get to this point, though, you would think in a world that made sense, by day number 3 or 4 of the genocide, every reasonable person would have went, oh, I see what this is. But no. It took a very fucking long time, and we still have people running around pretending to be Democrats, even though they're diet MAGA, and they're super serving this fucking terror state. Not going to happen, bro. Not going to fucking happen. So the Republican Party's hopeless. I'll just say that right now. Yes, young Republicans are 50-50 on Israel, but the old people are all in for Israel. The party's still overwhelmingly pro-Israel. Literally every Republican not named Thomas Massie voted to merge the U.S. and Israeli military and intelligence apparatus. So they're done. They're useless. The Republican Party is a fascist terrorist organization, as I've told you 1,000 times. They're a death cult. They're every negative thing you've ever heard of, ever. But the Democratic Party, your voters are not fucking around on this issue. Your voters are 100% crystal clear. We are done with Israel. So either mirror your voters or get the fuck out of the way. It really is that simple. A 67-point collapse, a 67-point implosion in the perception of Israel. If you're not adjusting with that in real time, then you're part of the motherfucking problem, and we're coming for you.
Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.
So what if doing all the things that makes you Donald Trump's best candidate ever for Attorney General means that you never actually get confirmed as Attorney General? It's not a riddle, it's being Todd Blanche. All of the ways that Todd Blanche has bastardized the rule of law to whitewash Trump's criminal history, push career prosecutors to their ethical and moral breaking points, and use the Department of Justice to zealously target Donald Trump's perceived political enemies for prosecution, investigation, and plain old harassment, it might be coming back to haunt him. 2 days ahead of a crucial vote scheduled to advance Todd Blanche's nomination out of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Democrats on that committee are demanding answers and records on the subpoenas that were sent to New York Times reporters, subpoenas that were so problematic that Todd Blanche's Justice Department was actually forced to retreat and withdraw them. The Democrats write this to Blanche, quote, "The administration's attempt to identify confidential press sources in connection with embarrassing public reports regarding the lack of security capabilities of Donald Trump's new Air Force One aircraft, gifted from the country of Qatar, appears to be retaliation ordered by Donald Trump himself. The government's conduct involved a series of apparent bad faith efforts to conceal notice of these subpoenas and intimidate journalists and their families following the publication of a story that allegedly enraged President Trump. This conduct appears to have violated the department's own policy set forth in the Justice Manual. 2 Republicans on the Judiciary Committee are also holding firm, for now, on their commitment to not advance Todd Blanche's nomination for AG until their demands are met. And Todd Blanche can't afford to lose either of their votes. Here's what Republican Senator Tom Tillis and Republican Senator John Cornyn told reporters from this network earlier today.
Were you on Todd Blanche?
We're still waiting on getting the changes that are necessary in 1776 and audit.
It has to be in writing and signed by Todd Blanche.
Do you need to see that by Thursday in order to be able to vote him out of committee?
Yes.
Okay. And can we? So right now, you should not be counting on your vote unless that is done. Is that
That's correct? They've been kind of radio silent for the last 24 hours. So would you? I think my staff is talking to them, but we're not. They know what they need to do. They just don't want to do it.
This vote is coming up very quickly. I mean, would you recommend that it be postponed if it's going this way?
That's being discussed. That's being discussed. But hopefully it won't be necessary.
So far, neither senator has been willing to take Todd Blanche at his word. Essentially, they don't trust him when he says that Trump's slush fund is dead. And that crisis of credibility extends just beyond Todd Blanche and other leaders. ProPublica is out with extensive new reporting that reviews hundreds of cases where judges have said they don't trust DOJ or DOJ lawyers either. From that reporting, quote, from Washington, D.C. to Rhode Island to Oregon, federal judges nominated by presidents from both parties, including Donald Trump, have zeroed in on what's called the presumption of regularity. It essentially means that judges must presume that the government did their jobs according to the rules and in good faith. And from the hundreds of cases they reviewed, they found, quote, more than 40 in which judges explicitly referenced the presumption of regularity. In many cases, judges have expressed frustration that they can no longer take the government at its word. Todd Blanche's stewardship of DOJ coming under increased bipartisan scrutiny is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Former Assistant Special Agent in charge at the FBI, National Security and Intelligence Analyst Michael Feinberg is here. He's also a fellow at Lawfare. Also joining us, voting rights attorney and founder of Democracy Docket, Mark Elias, is back. And MS Now Justice and Intelligence reporter Ken Delanian is here. Ken, what do you know about what Cornyn referenced there as sort of, not back channel, but staff to staff level communications and the possibility of postponing Thursday's committee vote on Todd Blanche?
Yeah, that's under active discussion, Nicole. It was so interesting to hear Cornyn say they know what they need to do. They just don't want to do it. Well, who doesn't want to do it? Does Todd Blanche really care whether he says in writing that the slush fund is going away, or is it really more Donald Trump? Because as Cornyn brilliantly elicited during Todd Blanche's hearing, you know, using his skills as a former prosecutor and cross-examining Todd Blanche, this is a written settlement with Donald Trump. And there's nothing in the settlement that says that the slush fund goes away unless there is an amendment to the settlement, unless Todd Blanche puts something in writing. Him just saying it doesn't make it so. They could bring it back at any time, and that's what Cornyn is concerned about and Tom Tillis is concerned about. They find this just completely offensive, the idea that there was going to be a fund that could possibly reward people who assaulted police officers on January 6th, and they are not going away on this, even as Democrats ask these hard questions, as you pointed out, about the subpoenas of New York Times reporters. Democrats not likely to get answers, but Cornyn and Tillis have the leverage.
What's so interesting, Michael Feinberg, is that a single one of these would be a confirmation halting scandal in and of itself, right? To find out that Donald Trump ordered Todd Blanche to order subpoenas into 5 New York Times journalists, to put them before a grand jury, to out their sources, and also involve their families, the mother of one and the spouses of 2. Here's Todd Blanche just owning what in a normal moment, in a normal time, in a normal future moment, is a scandal.
The Department of Justice requires that I authorize it, which I did. And those reporters, we're not targeting reporters. They're material witnesses, just like a reporter would be a material witness to a car crash. Yeah, they are witnesses. And so,
and the question you want to ask them is, who were their sources?
No,
that goes to the heart of the First Amendment.
No, the question we want to ask them is, who provided them with classified national security information, which everybody in this body should want to protect? I would hope.
The Wall Street Journal News.
Michael Feinberg, there is sort of an insulting. It's one thing when Todd Blanche insults the media. It's another when he insults members of the Senate. that will determine whether or not he's confirmed. But what he says there is the same thing that he's asked. You want to ask them who their sources were. That goes to the heart of the First Amendment. No, I want to ask them who provided them with classified national security information, which everybody in this body should want to protect, I would hope. This is a line that I think wouldn't have been crossed without sort of roadblock coverage in another moment, and we'll do our best to lift it up for the scandal that it is. But it did elicit, even in these abnormal times, an extraordinary result. Todd Blanche withdrew those subpoenas, and for now they are dead.
Well, in every way you can possibly imagine, these particular subpoenas were in violation of policy, precedent, and tradition. From an investigator's point of view in the FBI, you are required, before seeking records from a reporter, to have exhausted all other investigative means you might have of getting the same information. And in the timeline that we've seen in this case, where Kash Patel is whisked back to the White House as he's about to leave town, told to personally take charge of this investigation, and the subpoenas are issued within 24 hours or so, it's impossible to believe that other techniques were tried at all, let alone that all other possible techniques were tried before going to these subpoenas. And the Justice Department itself supports the policy of using the least intrusive means in an investigation and prosecution whenever possible, just as a general matter of respecting citizens' privacy and civil liberties. If you are jumping directly to search warrants and trying to get records of communications, you're by definition not using the least intrusive means. There are a lot of other things you can do. If all they are concerned about is who might have leaked classified information, get a list of everybody in the White House who had access to that information and go after their records first. That's how it's always been done, because we recognize that there is a value in having an unfettered free press that is allowed to do its job. Now, look, there are times that I do think the press oversteps its side of the deal. There was a case many years ago during the Bush administration, I think, or during the Obama administration, where the New York Times ran the true name of some CIA officers. And it did nothing to serve the story. I don't have a problem with when you've endangered an American's life, trying to get to the bottom of it. But the only reason this story is being investigated is because it embarrassed Trump. We're not giving away weapon systems, war plans. This is solely because there is egg on the White House's face. And I can think of many more instances under this administration where political appointees gave up classified information, in some cases by adding journalists to signal chats inadvertently, and the administration did absolutely nothing. So to pretend that it's following any sort of normal procedure here, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Elias, my recollection of this story was that Donald Trump, in a press conference, announced that he was sending the Qatari-gifted Air Force One on a tour by itself to visit troops without him on it. So he tells this lie, and the reporters who were there start asking questions. Why is he sending the Qatari-gifted Air Force One to visit troops without him on it? Like every Trump scandal, if you just, like, you don't even scratch, it's not even scratching the surface. If you just touch the screen, it starts with a big, bold Trump lie. And Miles Taylor has made my favorite point on this whole story. The truth didn't just get out to the press. The truth of the leak into the truth getting out to the press got out immediately. That Kash Patel had squatted at the White House for 8 hours to spearhead a leak investigation was out within hours of the original reporting about the security concerns about the Qatari-gifted Air Force One.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point you made is the most important one. Everything with Donald Trump begins with a lie. It then proceeds to lies, and then it ends with a lie. And so, anyone who starts with the proposition that what Donald Trump and this White House are telling them about anything of consequence is making a huge mistake, whether it is this airplane and, why it was that they had to shift up how he was traveling, whether it is what methods they use to investigate, down to what standards they are going to use to investigate. I mean, one of the things that Todd Blanche has done repeatedly over and over again is to suggest that there are safeguards in place that, in fact, are not in place. We see with our own eyes that what we are witnessing are political decisions by a Department of Justice targeting their political opponent.
Bro, the level just started and we're already getting overrun. I gotta take these guys out and build this crossbow tower as fast as possible. I don't even think I have a choice. Quickly. Ooh, that was close, but that should take care of things. Wait, never mind, more guys. I should have saw that coming. Anyway, we can't handle this without a second crossbow tower and maybe a wall to block the enemy's path too. That should hold us. Wait, now we have these big beefers coming? When does it end? This is Kingshot, a tower defense and base building strategy game that just came out recently and is already top 5 in strategy games with over 1 million downloads. Kingshot combines strategy, exploration, resource management, PvP and PvE battles, plus a whole lot more. I suggest you give it a try, if you think you have a shot at becoming a king, that is.
Kingshot, build and fight.
If anyone in this room found out what I was, I wouldn't make it out alive.
Quinn Talon, Squad 3. Is this a joke? Why is a level 1 on Squad 3?
300 heads turned to...
Lawrence, welcome back.
Hey, Jen. Troy Jackson, the Democratic nominee for Senate in Maine, got a gift tonight from Susan Collins. She voted to confirm the Director of National Intelligence, who is not intelligent enough to know who won the 2020 presidential election. Jay Clayton's testimony on that was, of course, devastating. Susan Collins, no problem voting to confirm.
I mean, listen, and if that doesn't tell you how Jay Clayton is going to be kind of waiting for Donald Trump to tell him exactly what to do, I don't know what does. So there you go. Maybe we know what the next ads will be, or some sort of ads. We'll see.
We will see, but I do think votes like that now in the United States Senate are going to matter in November.
No question about it. And we'll see what happens with Todd Blanche, too. But that's another one that I think everybody's going to be watching, who is challenging a sitting Republican member, too.
Every Republican running for re-election voted for that Director of National Intelligence tonight. So we'll see how that feels for them in November.
Not going to feel good, Lawrence. I'll look forward to hearing you talk about it.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thanks. Well, the loser, Donald Trump, surrendered today. Again. Donald Trump always lies about losing and always tries to hide his moments of complete and utter surrender. And so it was today. When Donald Trump loses an election, he lies and says he won. When Donald Trump loses in court, he says things like this: "The Supreme Court's ruling is wrong. I will be asking for a rehearing by the United States Supreme Court immediately," in capital letters. "This miscarriage of justice will destroy America if they don't change their absolutely insane decision." That is what loser Donald Trump wrote after the United States Supreme Court ruled that the Constitution means exactly what it says. That anyone born in the United States is born with the birthright of American citizenship. The Supreme Court's ruling is wrong. I will be asking for a rehearing by the United States Supreme Court immediately. Immediately, in all capital letters. Immediately meant July 8th. That's the day Donald Trump wrote immediately that he was going to immediately ask the Supreme Court to do something that it absolutely never does. And by never, I mean the Supreme Court hasn't done it since 1965. So never during the lifetimes of many of the people watching this program, probably most of the people watching this program tonight. Donald Trump said he was going to immediately ask the Supreme Court to just change its mind about a decision it spent months deliberating and writing about. And we said on this program that night that that will never happen. The Supreme Court would never change its mind about Donald Trump's attempt to rewrite the Constitution's provision of birthright citizenship. And we were once again right about that, and that was not a risky prediction that the Supreme Court simply wouldn't do it. Everyone covering that story should have immediately said that, of course, there is zero chance for the Supreme Court to rehear that same case. And Donald Trump made absolutely sure that there was zero possibility of the Supreme Court hearing his case because Donald Trump never asked the court to do that. Immediately did not mean immediately. So yeah, big surprise. His social media post was a complete lie. I will be asking for a rehearing by the United States Supreme Court immediately. That was a lie. He didn't do it immediately. He didn't do it the next day. He didn't do it last week when the deadline for filing that petition for a rehearing was expiring. And he didn't do it on Saturday when the deadline actually expired. And there is not a Trump supporter in the world who knows that that deadline expired on Saturday and Donald Trump surrendered. And so not one person who made the mistake of believing Donald Trump was going to immediately ask the Supreme Court to do something that they would never do will ever know that Donald Trump was lying and he simply surrendered to the Supreme Court's authority over him. Donald Trump lied his way through that immediate news coverage period of the Supreme Court ruling, claiming he was going to appeal it, so he never had to admit that he lost, because that is the Trump way. When you lose, lie about losing, and shift people's attention to something else. And with Donald Trump, there is always something else. And now, for 151 days, there has always been Donald Trump's war and continues to be, which, according to Donald Trump's own statements about his war, he appears to be losing. When Donald Trump began his war, his time estimate for winning his war was first measured in days, then in weeks, then in days again, then in weeks again, and now it has been months. It has been 5 full months. The Iranian regime never gave a time estimate for how long they expected to fight for their survival. That Iran's resistance to Donald Trump's bombs and to Donald Trump's attempts at negotiations has been strong enough to make everything Donald Trump has said about his war a lie. Everything. And that means everything Donald Trump currently says about his war is ignorable. In the second month of Donald Trump's war, he promised to commit a war crime when he wrote on April 7th at 8:06 a.m., quote, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again." Donald Trump promised to murder 93 million people in Iran, and it was condemned around the world as a war crime in and of itself, because threats of terrorism like that are war crimes. That statement, that war crime statement, carried a shock with it, even among the people who didn't believe Donald Trump would do it. It was sickening enough that he would say it. And then, 10 hours and 26 minutes after saying a whole civilization will die tonight, Donald Trump said, quote, "I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks." And from that moment forward, the world knew that the clownish man who started this war did not know how to wage this war and did not know how to negotiate an end to this war. And so when he threatened to commit war crimes against Iran, again, this morning, No one in Iran or anywhere else in the world had any reason to believe him.
I could take out most of their bridges in less than an hour. Less than an hour. But, it takes them 10 years to build a bridge. Bridges take the longest, and power plants are second. I can knock out the power plants. Within one day, all of their power plants would be gone. And I let them know that, with negotiations. I said, look, people want me to do that. I think I get almost the same thing out of it as doing it. But the problem is they'll never be able to, I think about 91 million people without power, without bridges, would have to live. And it's a very, very delicate balance. Yeah. So I think we have a very strong position right now. They know I'm going to do that if they don't make a deal. The bridges are going to be gone. Literally in less than, I would say in 2 hours, most of the bridges, the major bridges will all be gone. And the power plants in one day. And, if I can avoid doing that, I'd like to do that.
And there is the master negotiator at work for the voters who believed they were electing a master negotiator. He is the single stupidest public negotiator in the history of American government, and the whole world knows it. Iran knows it. Even the propagandists at Fox can no longer pretend to believe Donald Trump when he says he is talking to members of the Iranian regime.
We hear that you're talking right now with leaders on Iran, but Iran has come out publicly and said, we're not talking to the U.S. We're going to pause as long as they're paused.
We are talking a little while ago because...
So could you tell me who you're talking to, Mr. President?
For some reason, we can be in the midst of a beautiful discussion, and they'll come out and say, we're not talking, or we didn't discuss nuclear. Well, that's all we discussed because they'll never have a nuclear weapon. They understand that. And we have had some very good talks.
It was a simple question. Who you're talking to, Mr. President? He says they're having talks. Talks with whom? Donald Trump rambled on for another 16 minutes with his Fox cheerleaders unable to mask their confusion without Donald Trump ever saying who he was talking to in Iran. And so the world can confidently conclude that Donald Trump is lying about that. And Trump voters who believed that Donald Trump was going to end Vladimir Putin's war of aggression in Ukraine on the first day of Donald Trump's presidency, as he promised, should by now know that Donald Trump doesn't know how to end wars, even if he starts the war. Donald Trump promised those same voters that he would never start a war. Trump voters hold the distinction in American political history as the voters who willingly and knowingly, well, maybe not knowingly, accepted more lies from their candidate than any other voters in American history. And if they didn't know they were accepting lies, it is their own fault, as analysts of information presented to them, that they could not tell that those were all lies. Donald Trump knows how badly his war is going. And that is why the man who craves camera attention for all of his Oval Office meetings did not allow that today. For the kinds of meetings where he has always pulled the cameras and reporters into the room and kept them there as long as possible. The first meeting was with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, who was subjected to the single craziest Oval Office meeting that any foreign president has ever had to endure in his first visit with the second-term Donald Trump in the Oval Office. President Zelensky continues to successfully fight a war started by the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump's friend, a war Donald Trump promised his voters he would end 552 days ago on the first day of this presidency. Donald Trump wanted no more attention brought to that failure today, and so the reporters and press photographers were barred from that Oval Office meeting. The photograph we have of the meeting was released by President Zelensky shortly after the meeting. And then Donald Trump released a similar photograph over 9 hours later, long after the Zelensky photograph had made its way around the world. The same thing happened in Donald Trump's next Oval Office meeting today with Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu. The war Donald Trump promised to end about 140 days ago was not something Donald Trump was willing to discuss with White House reporters today, Donald Trump's war in Iran. And so they were barred from the Oval Office for that meeting. And the photographic evidence of that meeting was released by Prime Minister Netanyahu, a proof of meeting photograph, a proof of failure photograph. And tonight at 8:54 p.m., Donald Trump finally released an identical photograph of that meeting. And so we will impatiently await the next volume of Regime Change by Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan to tell us exactly what profanity Donald Trump might have used today in screaming at Bibi Netanyahu, as they report he did in their new best-selling must-read book, Regime Change. Quote, bellowing, Trump told Netanyahu he was sick of his antics. I've done everything to protect you. You better effing go along with this. It's been going on for too effing long. Everybody's sick of you, Bibi, Trump said. All the Jews are sick of you. Even the 2 Jews on this call are sick of you, Trump added, referring to Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. You can't back out of this. I'm the best friend Israel ever had. Everybody hates you. And I've stood by you. He continued to shout. I'm telling you, Trump yelled, this is a great deal for Israel. And so we have to wonder, how many times did Donald Trump say, everybody hates you, to Bibi Netanyahu today? But we don't have to wonder what Donald Trump accomplished in his meeting today with the man who he says everybody hates, because we know Donald Trump is lost in his presidency. We know Donald Trump is lost in his war. And there is no evidence that Bibi Netanyahu is going to help Donald Trump find his way out of the war that he started. And so what we know about Donald Trump makes it very likely that absolutely nothing was accomplished today in his meeting with Bibi Netanyahu. Donald Trump's meeting with President Zelensky is a bit more complicated and harder to read because President Zelensky is by far the smartest person who was in the Oval Office today. And so President Zelensky, who is leading his country at war for its survival, expanded the targeting in his war on Saturday to include what appeared to be a drone attack on an Iranian cargo ship in the Caspian Sea. The New York Times reported, quote, President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Saturday that Ukraine struck a cargo vessel moving military supplies between Iran and Russia in the Caspian Sea. He said Ukraine also hit an oil platform and a Russian-made missile ship in the Caspian, which is more than 600 miles from the front line in Ukraine. And so the man who Donald Trump tried to turn into an enemy of the United States with his first Oval Office meeting with him last year has now launched an attack on an Iranian cargo ship, possibly moving weapons that Russia could use against Ukraine. And so how does the tiny mind of Donald Trump process that complication? The New York Times reported that President Zelensky, quote, may also use the attack to try to persuade President Trump that Ukraine and the United States share the same enemy and to advocate for closer military ties. Donald Trump didn't see that one coming from President Zelensky. And President Zelensky is emphasizing which side Donald Trump's friend Vladimir Putin is on in Donald Trump's war with Iran. The New York Times reports Mr. Zelensky said Ukraine's intelligence services had gathered evidence that Russia was providing Iran with satellite surveillance of Gulf states and U.S. military bases in the region, helping Tehran plan and carry out attacks. He said Ukraine would share the intelligence with its Western allies. And tonight, Donald Trump continues to cower in fear of Vladimir Putin, the man who is the Iranian regime's most powerful and closest ally, the man who helps Iran carry out attacks against the United States, the man to whom the weak and cowardly Donald Trump would never, ever dare to say, everybody hates you. Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Congressman Chris Deluzio of Pennsylvania. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee and a Navy veteran. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Congressman. Here we are now, over the 5-month mark, now we are in the 6th month of Donald Trump's war in Iran. You have experience in the region. You've been through the Strait of Hormuz in your Navy service. What is your assessment of where we are tonight, and what do you make of today's meetings in the White House and how they might impact this war?
Well, Lawrence, I certainly hope that Donald Trump has not done what he's done in the past, which was when presented with lousy intelligence by Prime Minister Netanyahu, Donald Trump jumped to go launch a war. He did something that every other American president this millennium was wise enough not to do. Yet Donald Trump was dumb enough to do it, and here we are. We're paying for the cost of this war at home, economically, of course. We've had so many Americans wounded, so many die, Iranian school children even killed. This war has been disastrous. It has destabilized the region. We are all paying for this. And again, it's a war that Donald Trump doesn't know how to get out of, which is why he never should have started it in the first place, which was why I worry about a meeting between him and Prime Minister Netanyahu. The last one of these, of course, again, helped get us into this mess.
So the Zelensky meeting today is the more interesting of the two meetings. That's the one where it's not easy to figure out what was said. Yeah. But clearly, Zelensky's strike against that Iranian ship was something done prior to his meeting with Donald Trump, no doubt, in the hope of getting some kind of closer support from Donald Trump for Ukraine.
I would think so. And again, this is not complicated stuff. As you said in your monologue, the Russians and Vladimir Putin have been key backers and allies of the Iranians, one of the only in the world, and certainly amongst their most significant, if not their most significant backers. Otherwise, the Iranians are pariahs to so many. And so for Donald Trump, as he's done in his first term, to push away and isolate and threaten the Ukrainians who are taking on this fight they didn't ask for with the Russians, while then launching a war against the Iranians where their chief backer is Russia. Again, this is not a coherent worldview. It's not the decisions that you'd expect of a president who's got his hand wrapped around world affairs. Donald Trump just certainly doesn't, and he's showing it every day.
We have had a report earlier this week that Donald Trump was presented with an assessment of the bombing near the Strait of Hormuz and other areas of Iran, saying there's nothing more that can be done from the air. They've reached a point of saturation bombing. They're especially near the Strait of Hormuz. What's your experience with that in the region? At what point would you expect the bombing to be unproductive there?
Well, I think we've seen the limit of this already. And remember, whether it's the mining risk, the drone strike risk, even RPGs, it doesn't take a ton of offensive pressure to scare shipping from going through the Strait of Hormuz, to make those insurers decide it's not worth the risk, even if, say, the American Navy, as Donald Trump has contemplated, is talking about escorting ships through. And let's remember, what did Donald Trump promise the American people when he ran in 2024? No new wars in the Middle East. He has launched a new war. He said that cost would come down. He has made costs go up through this war, through his reckless trade approach. And this is a record of dishonesty and failure. And the American people are smart. They see it for what it is.
Congressman Chris Deluzio, thank you very much for starting off our coverage tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence.
And coming up, a New York Times investigation has revealed the hidden cost to taxpayers of Donald Trump's Qatari jet, despite, quote, the fact that the Pentagon has tried to mask the total price tag, according to that New York Times investigation. One of the reporters in that investigation will join us next. About the New York Times reporting on the plane that Donald Trump accepted as a gift from Qatar. And the New York Times response to that threat is to keep investigating that plane. A New York Times investigation of Donald Trump's acceptance of the gift of a Boeing 747 from a Qatari dictator led to, quote, ballooning costs and trade-offs in safety features in the attempt to convert that plane to a version of Air Force One. The massive investigative report written by Maggie Haberman, Tyler Pager, and our next guest, Eric Lipton, cites multiple sources who described the sensitive information about the process and the plane on the condition of anonymity, and states, quote, Donald Trump was personally engaged in making decisions about the retrofitting of the donated plane, giving the final approval on the features and security measures that would be included. Several key security and safety features on the Boeing planes that have been used for decades as Air Force One are not visible on the upgraded jet, including a lower level exit for high-risk situations, additional backup power capacity, and an advanced anti-missile system, public Air Force records and photographs examined by the Times show. The government spent hundreds of millions of dollars to purchase equipment needed to train pilots to fly the 747-8 plane so quickly, on top of the approximately $400 million cost of the upgrades that the administration has publicly acknowledged. The Pentagon has tried to mask the total price tag, including from Congress, by taking the funds from a classified budget for nuclear modernization. The Times reports that experts say this kind of upgrade would normally take several years, but Donald Trump's demands gave them about 8 months. And due to that rush, quote, some White House officials initially expected it would only be used for domestic travel or to visit allied countries with U.S. military bases. The White House press secretary, who has lied about virtually everything she has ever said in the White House, claims that the plane is safe for presidential travel. Of course, how would she have any idea? In a separate news report for the Times, Eric Lipton reports this about Donald Trump's nuclear deal with Saudi Arabia. It may also contribute to a major trend in Mr. Trump's second term, allowing the government to help enrich the president, his family advisors, and others in his orbit. And of course, Donald Trump and his friends may be helped as a result of orchestrating that Saudi nuclear deal. A number of the president's allies and relatives, including members of his cabinet, stand to benefit if this big bet on nuclear power pays off. Certain investors with ties to these deals are positioned to profit even if the delivery of large new loads of nuclear-powered electricity remains years away. The White House Assistant Press Secretary, of course, big surprise, denies any possible financial motive for the Trumps in that deal with Saudi Arabia. Joining us now is New York Times investigative reporter Eric Lipton. Eric, first, to the plane Donald Trump wants to use as Air Force One and then keep for himself, your reporting continues to find more ways in which this plane really doesn't qualify, doesn't make the grade as a usable Air Force One. What else have we been discovering about the plane?
It's just that, for decades, the American government has seen Air Force One as a kind of flying Oval Office in which a president should be able to operate and command the military and engage with foreign leaders at any time, never with any disruption in the communication, and be able to land at airports that don't have ground crews that would traditionally service the plane. And so it really is a flying war platform. I mean, it's even designed to be able to sustain the electromagnetic pulse of if there were to be a nuclear attack and to keep flying. So there's all kinds of redundancies that are built into this plane. It makes it's not really anything like a passenger airplane. And so, what we found was that in order to try to get this plane ready as fast as possible for the president at his insistence, that they skipped a number of the upgrades, particularly if they were going to require structural changes. So as you said, for example, there's a lower level exit and entrance, which has a built-in stairwell, so you don't need to rely on ground crews. That was the stairwell that President George W. Bush used on September 11th of 2001, guarded by, machine gun carrying military on a day in which the United States was under attack. It was also a stairwell that President Trump himself used in October of 2025 when there was a perception that there may have been a threat at Palm Beach Airport. So he used those lower steps. But those lower steps don't exist on the new plane, and that's just one of a number of security upgrades that they didn't build in because President Trump wanted the plane so quickly.
How long will it take now? What do we know about the grounding of the plane now, and at what point Donald Trump will try to fly it again?
Well, I mean, all they've said so far is that they expect some point later this year to do additional upgrades. You know, the president has referred to as maxing it up or maxing it out. And they said they're going to do that in about a month. So it's not really possible to make structural changes to a 747-8 in a month. I mean, if you're going to cut a hole in the plane, it needs to be suspended on this incredibly sophisticated platform to prevent like gravity stress on the plane. So, you know, any kind of major changes you're going to make are going to take a lot longer than a month. So it's unclear what they can pull off in a month, but they're going to try to make some upgrades as we understand it.
And what is the total cost of this venture as of tonight, as far as we know?
I mean, they've said that initially that it wasn't going to exceed $400 million, but then they spent at least another $400 million on planes that are going to be used, that were used to train the pilots and also for spare parts. So that's $800 million there. Now those two planes, they bought two planes from Lufthansa. These are 747-8s. They bought another two planes. I mean, the first one they bought because they had to move super fast to train pilots, because the Qatari jet is quite different from the old Air Force One. So it has much more, much different electronics. So the pilots had to be trained in how to use it. So they bought another Lufthansa plane to train the pilots because they had so little advance warning that this was going to happen. So that's another hundreds of millions of dollars in additional cost. But the short answer is we don't know. And it's really unusual because, the cost of building a new presidential airplane has always been a public matter. It's in the Pentagon budgets. We know that it's going to cost them about $5.1 billion to do the two new Air Force Ones that Boeing's building that are going to be ready starting in 2028. But we really have no idea how much they spent on retrofitting the Qatari jet.
Eric Lipton, thank you very much for your invaluable reporting on this.
Thank you so much.
Coming up, Iowa Democratic Senate candidate Josh Turek could be the one who gives Democrats control of the United States Senate in the next election. He is provably the strongest candidate for Senate this year, and we will offer video proof of that fact when Josh Turek joins us next.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. We are now 98 days out from the midterm elections. Right now, the projection is that this is going to be very, very close. And a big reason for that, particularly on the Senate side, is that Donald Trump is just very, very unpopular. Look at any poll over the last few weeks, even the last month. But look at this poll today from YouGov. It shows Donald Trump at just 34% approval. That's the lowest he's ever been in either term in that poll. That's real, real bad. While the president works to basically enrich himself or play with his various toys, the Republican-controlled Congress knows he's weaker because it's defying him more and more as lawmakers sprint to the August recess. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party, despite facing a lot of headwinds, well chronicled, I think, particularly over the last week or so, including a national party, a DNC that's effectively broke, some very intense coalitional conflicts that continue to play out, has more or less gotten its act together enough to field a bunch of really strong candidates, changing several races Republicans expected to win easily into toss-ups. Last night, we spoke with the new Maine Democratic Senate nominee, Troy Jackson, the guy who raised about $2 million in just the 2 days after securing the party's nomination. A poll taken just before the nominating convention found Jackson favored over incumbent Republican Susan Collins by 3 points. Remember, Plattner was polling like 5 points behind before he dropped out. But this is the key. He has a +5 favorability rating in that matchup, outmatching Collins -18. Another seat that's currently looking surprisingly good for Democrats. In some ways, I think the surprise of the cycle is Georgia. I mean, a year or two ago, right, the idea that Jon Ossoff would cruise to re-election seemed ridiculous. If he was going to win, it was going to be an uphill battle and he was going to have to grind it out. It's a state that, let's remember, Republicans swept statewide and the presidential in 2024 with Trump at the top of the ticket. But a recent survey of Georgia voters found Ossoff up by 9 points over his Republican opponent, Mike Collins. He is also outraising Collins by a ton. He pulled in $20 million in the second quarter. He's got $42 million in the bank. and compare that to Collins' campaign raising just $2.1 million with about the same amount on hand. Now remember, we live in the super PAC era, right? So there's a whole bunch of big money that could come pouring in from those super PACs and corporate interests and big wealthy billionaire donors. But if that does pour in, Ossoff has also been on message about Trump's corruption, as well as highlighting Collins' son-in-law, who has, quote, a history of amplifying white supremacist social media accounts and echoing anti-Semitic tropes online. You should go read that piece. There's some really nasty stuff in there. And this is how Ossoff's campaigning on the ground, tying Collins to the most unpopular aspects of the Trump agenda.
So what has Mike done for Georgian families and workers? People like you and me? A whole lot of nothing. From the grocery store to the gas pump, Mike has made life more expensive for all of us. He supported and voted to protect Trump's tariffs, fueling record inflation while cutting taxes for the ultra-rich. You see, Mike's not a working trucker. He's a man who wrote his daddy's name from business to Congress, a politician who voted to hike our health care costs and defund rural hospitals so he could take care of billionaires and himself. A lackey who's in lockstep with all of Trump's chaos.
Now, it's notable there, right? Georgia's a state Trump carried in 2024, right? Swing state. Ossoff is running ads calling him a lackey, right? Who facilitates Trump's chaos. So you got the affordability, the ultra-rich, and Trump chaos. We're seeing that message everywhere. Again, even in states Trump carried. In Ohio, former Senator Sherrod Brown is trying to unseat Senator John Husted. A recent pair of polls show they're basically in a dead heat. Now, Brown has the benefit in this race of being a very known quantity in the state. Obviously, he served as senator in that state for 3 terms, and it's shaping up to be a fairly favorable environment for Democrats, particularly as issues like inflation and data centers weigh down Republican incumbents, something that Brown highlighted in a recent ad.
He's been called the face of data centers in Ohio. Why? Because John Husted spent years aggressively recruiting data centers to the state, cutting sweetheart tax deals and fast-tracking approvals, while ordinary residents watch their electricity bills explode.
We are here with Ohio Senator John Husted. We have a lot of experience with something called data centers.
John Husted. Who's he really working for?
That ad jumped out at me because it's not the only one this cycle. In fact, that's something that is popping up all across the country. It's one of those issues, it's a rare issue, that Americans are in broad bipartisan agreement on, at least for now, that they are against data centers. And we've seen opposition bubbling up in all sorts of areas. Another race to watch, a pickup the Democrats have to have if they're going to take back the Senate, is, of course, North Carolina. That's where former Governor Roy Cooper is consistently pulling ahead of Trump-backed Michael Whatley. And then there's Texas. New poll out today found Democrat James Talarico up by 5 points over State Attorney General Ken Paxton. Now, this is an interesting development, given what we know historically about Texas. First of all, Talarico has raised $30 million in the second quarter. Back in 2018, when Beto O'Rourke built this fundraising juggernaut, he brought in a total of $80 million. He came up short of unseating Senator Cruz by 2 points. But it was the best electoral performance by a Texas Democrat in a generation. He got within spitting distance. But here's the thing. Throughout that race, which was the closest Democrats have come, Beto O'Rourke only led one poll in September of that year, and even then it was just by 2 points. Since Paxton won the Republican primary runoff in May, Talarico has led in 3 polls, Paxton has led in 3, and one of them had them tied. That looks like a dead heat. Another factor working against O'Rourke was that Ted Cruz was an incumbent, as unpopular as Ted Cruz may be, was, still is. But Ken Paxton's even less popular. I mean, the polling bears this out. He is a genuinely toxic person. And while Talarico has highlighted Paxton's failings, like most of the Democratic candidates, he is also hitting the affordability issue that's being felt across the country.
Too many Texans feel like they're drowning. The cost of groceries, gas, healthcare. I'm James Talarico. In the State House, I brought both parties together to make life more affordable, capping the cost of insulin, cutting taxes for small businesses, and passing the largest property tax cut in Texas history. In the Senate, I'll take on corruption and keep fighting to lower your costs. I approve this message because it shouldn't be this hard to keep your head above water.
I got to editorialize here for a second. If you're going to be a Democrat who's going to be the first statewide Democrat to win in Texas in 30 years, that's basically the campaign you got to run, right? That's the message. So after Texas, you got 2 more states to watch. Again, it's a very wide playing board right now. Alaska has a jungle primary on August 18th. It does seem in reach for a Democratic flip because Democrat Mary Peltola, who's won statewide in Alaska before, she was the lone member of Congress, is polling just 2 points behind incumbent Republican Dan Sullivan. The other race that is going to be a big one and make a big difference is Michigan. That's where Abdul El Sayed and Haley Stevens are the last two Democratic candidates standing. That primary is exactly a week from today, August 4th. We're going to have special live coverage on that night. Whoever wins that primary will be the Democratic candidate to take on Republican Mike Rogers. We're 98 days out. Trump is very, very unpopular. Things look close. Also maybe reachable for Democrats looking to take back a Senate majority. Something that, again, 2 years ago seemed impossible. A year ago seemed like a real stretch. And, as we've learned in politics, a whole lot can happen in the next 98 days. Usually, midterms come down to a referendum on the president's party and how voters think things are going. And right now, there are just big majorities that are very unhappy with both. Claire McCaskill is a former Democratic senator from Missouri with experience in flipping a seat in a red state. Cornell Belcher, veteran Democratic strategist, and they both join me now. Let me start with you, Cornell, just on how you sort of view the polling signals. We went through some of the individual races. You know, there's always going to be a relationship between individual races and national environment, and then you'll have sort of under and over performers. You know, I think Ossoff right now is sort of overperforming if you look at the polling. What's your general read about where things stand right now, 98 days out?
Well, where things stand is that Democrats have an expanded playing field for the Senate. But let's level set for a minute, Chris, and you know this, and I know Senator knows this. No Democrat's going to have a cakewalk in Georgia, right? He may have a lead now, but in the end, you know, if a Democrat wins Georgia by 1 or 2 points, that's a really big deal. So look, the polls are going to shrink. But one of the things that we've been talking about time and time again, this is where Trump actually does impact it, is he's underwater in so many of these states, right? He's underwater in Ohio. He's underwater in Iowa. So, and what does that mean? What does that really mean in terms of his approval and where it meets the road for election is that we know the vast majority, whether you're Democrat or Republican, the vast majority of voters who disapprove of the president, they vote against the president. They vote against the president's party, and those who strongly disapprove, you know, upwards of 70% vote against the president's party. So when you see a lot of these states coming online, there's absolutely a Trump factor in that. And when you get underneath it, he's losing support among key groups of voters that were big for Republicans in the last couple of elections. And the Fox poll right now, Chris, he's underwater with white men, and he's underwater with non-college white voters. And look, we know those are voters that groups that he carried by 20 plus points, and he's now underwater with. So I think it's expanding and opening up the map. But also Democrats have, to your point that you were making, it's good candidates who fit these seats, right? It's Trump, it's good candidates, and there's issues. And if you look at the issue playing field from data centers to affordability, Democrats do have an advantage on the issues.
Claire, you know, I was thinking about that 2018 race, which was where the Democrats took the House, but Republicans made gains in the Senate, obviously, as you know. And a lot of that had to do with the sort of structural factors, right? There was this realignment happening that continued to move in certain directions, particularly among rural counties in your state of Missouri. We saw it in Montana. We saw it all over the country, right? One thing I think now is that realignment it feels like he has juiced as much juice as you can get out of it. and there's a real question now, right? Like, at a certain point, you can't run margins up in rural counties above 90%, right? You like the realignment stuff he's gotten those voters. You kind of come back to some of the swing voters that have determined these elections before that it seems to me opens up some space for, say, Sherrod Brown in Ohio or Josh Turek in Iowa, which were states that were looking like they had kind of moved so resolutely into that column.
Yeah, first of all, I will push back a little bit on the premise that it's not happening in rural America, because it is. I've driven through Missouri recently in very rural areas, and I remember what it felt like when I drove through those areas during election season back not too long ago. And there were Trump flags, there were Trump signs, there was just a sense that everything had gone very passionately towards Donald Trump. They're gone now. And the farmers are mad. they're mad. They've lost a market that they worked to get for decades. Their input costs are skyrocketing. Rural hospitals are on life support. It is not a bed of roses for Donald Trump in rural America right now. And that's why the DSCC has now sent out $40 million, not to 5 states, not to 6 states, not to 8 states, but to 10 states, including Iowa and Florida and, frankly, Mississippi. I mean, we've got a chance in places we haven't had a chance in a long, long time. And even Montana is at play if we can somehow get the anti-Republican candidates down to 1 instead of 2.
Yeah, and let me just say, I totally agree with you. My point was that the sort of juicing of those rural margins has sort of come back on the rubber band, right? That
Correct.
Like it was still sort of moving in his direction back in 2018, the kind of arrow of that. And you get to a certain point where it's not, there's nothing left there. It's coming back. I think objectively, partly just, trends and stuff. And that does put states in play. I mean, let's talk about, you talked about Montana, you talked about Iowa. I want to show this Montana polling because I do think it's interesting. There's an independent who's running, and there's a Democrat who I think the Democrats want to not run because they want the independent to take on the Republican. But as a sort of, again, as a kind of window where the electorate is, we've got polling today that shows Seth Bodnar, the sort of independent who I think would probably caucus with Democrats or be a more amenable vote than the Republican, is polling up in that race if you had the Democrat drop out. She says she's not going to. I think that's probably right. But that number to me, Cornell, says it is a pretty flashing sign about where things are just generally in the country and the electorate.
Yeah, and to that point that the senator was making, look, it's also seen in the data where he ran up big scores among rural voters in the last couple elections, and Republicans have as well. But if you look inside the polling right now, in rural areas, that has come down. And if you look at the suburbs and, quite frankly, urban areas, and the suburbs where a lot of these, you can't squeeze any more out of the rural areas, the suburbs become a swing area, they're breaking for the Democrat. And look, in the Washington Post poll, Democrats are carrying, the generic horse race by 20 points among independents. And so that's real collapse among the middle, moderate, nonpartisan part of it is a big deal. One thing about Texas is also interesting, really quickly, is that what you're seeing is that supposed sort of realignment or move of Hispanic voters to the right for Republicans. You're seeing in Texas that was not solidified, and you see it moving back, which puts Texas in real play. And one quick thing about the money by the DSCC, I love, and I know the senator will love this too, is that they're not dumping that money for television; they're dumping it for on the ground touches and communications and grassroots and get out the vote efforts.
Claire, if you're a Democrat trying to win in a state like Iowa or Ohio, or as you were in Missouri, right? You've got to find things to separate yourself, A, from the national party, B, that you can sort of make hay with against your opponent in the environment you're in. And that's why the Sherrod Brown data center ad was so interesting to me. And I'm curious just how it struck you as someone who, again, had to win elections in sort of uphill terrain, twice.
Yeah, I think the data centers are very, very important. And I think, frankly, there's a lot of signs in this cycle that remind me of 18, but in reverse because of the Iranian war. I won in 06 because of the Iraq war. That is how I beat a sitting Republican in the United States Senate from Missouri. And we have the same issue now. And the reason it has more power this time, I think, is because people are seeing it every time they fill up their gas tank. And they know it's because Donald Trump went into a war of choice that wasn't well thought out. They know they're paying the price. So if you combine the data centers and you combine gas prices, it's a powerful, powerful message for anybody who's not a Republican.
Yeah, that's a great point about that 06 race. That really was, well, you were there and you did it, but yes, that was the Iraq was really front and center in that round. Claire McCaskill, Cornell Belcher, thank you both. That was great. Coming up, Senator Mitch McConnell is still out of the office. What does that mean for the voters of Kentucky? What it can mean for the Democratic Party and the future of the Senate? That's next.
People are objectively worse than any other creature.
I get what I want from the sky to the ground.
Has issued this ultimatum to 84-year-old Republican Senator Mitch McConnell, who, as you may know, has not been seen in public since he was hospitalized 44 days ago. Quote, verbally address the people of Kentucky and provide proof of your capacity to serve or resign. The Democratic governor gave that ultimatum in a letter addressed to McConnell, quote, under the assumption he is capable of reading and responding verbally and not incapacitated by means of consciousness or cognition. Beshear also repeated his message on camera today.
All I'm asking for, and the people of Kentucky are asking for, is transparency and honesty, that Senator McConnell still has the capacity to serve. And I hope he does. I wish him well. I hope his health is improving. But if he can have a 17 minutes conversation with his protege, he can call into any of your news stations for 3. All we're asking is just a little bit of proof. We have seen rampant speculation across social media and elsewhere. It could all be fully avoided, and it's all within Senator McConnell's power. But because he won't do that, the fact is that we don't know.
Beshear sent a copy of the letter to Senate Majority Leader John Thune urging him to investigate McConnell's condition. This is happening because, apart from a few Republicans in McConnell's orbit, no one, not even his constituents, has heard from McConnell since he was taken to the hospital more than 6 weeks ago. His office has released 2 photos of him, spying next to his wife, as you see there, those 2. There's been no other communication from him and no transparency about his prognosis. Barbara Boxer is a former Democratic senator from California, and she joins me now. And obviously, you served in the Senate alongside Mitch McConnell. This is a very strange situation. What do you make of it all?
It's bizarre, and there's something wrong with the Senate. It's dysfunctional that they're not figuring this out. The Constitution says we're in charge of the rules surrounding our own members. And I do want to say this. You know, I don't want people to think I'm being partisan. When Senator Feinstein was ill and she had missed so many votes, I called her and I said, Diane, please, you know, you've got such a wonderful record. You shouldn't stay there. I left. It's great. You can get to speak, but she was angry at me. So there's a certain thing that's happening here. Now, remember, in the Senate, the median age is 65. That means half of them are less than 65 and half of them are older than 65. So this is an issue that has to be addressed. The last thing I'll say here to you is this. We get elected by the people. The people are the boss. I think Andy Beshear is showing great restraint and respect in what he's saying. And basically, we work for the federal government. So today I looked at the rules for a normal federal employee, quote unquote. I say normal, not elected. They get 13 days a year of paid leave. 13 days, you can carry it over, but you have to discuss it with, HR. This is wrong. And Mitch McConnell, this started, I looked it up back in 2023, where he missed 29 votes due to his fall. 2024, it continued. He missed 31 votes. 2025, 73 votes. And now in 2026, he's missed 27% of votes, 56 votes. So this is wrong.
It's hard. We talked about Tom Keene, who was a member of the House Republican incumbent who disappeared for a while, and he kept saying, "I'll let you know when I come back." We talked about this. He said, you got to be transparent. And obviously, health issues can happen to anyone at any age, right? There's obviously an age component in all this, it being the Senate, but it can happen to anyone at any age. And no one loves to talk about what's going on with their health, particularly if they're, in a rehab facility. But the general thing here that you do need some disclosure and transparency. It's weird how much that seems to have been abandoned. People do have to say what's up with what their health condition is when they are a publicly elected leader who currently does not have the capacity to represent the voters of Kentucky.
You have to tell your boss what's wrong. If you're in the private sector and you don't show up, right, day after day after day, you're not going to take a photo. If you're a boss, you're not going to take a photo from the husband or wife of the person you need to work. This is so obvious. And I think, I was chair of the ethics committee for a long time. It's a very bipartisan place. They ought to take a look at this. Is it really ethical what's happening? I don't think it is. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think you start by looking at how most federal employees are treated and take it from there.
We should also note that in his long career, Mitch McConnell has voted against paid leave, numerous times, I think dozens of times, including, bills that would provide paid leave for 6 weeks for everyone in the country, things like that. There is a wrinkle here that I want to get your feedback on too, because I've seen people, there's been some sort of anger directed at Bashir that he's not doing more. But in terms of how this cashes out in a partisan sense, right now, you have a pretty narrow Republican majority, and one of those senators is occupying one of those positions and can't make any votes, which is not the worst thing for Democrats, which is something that Governor Bashir actually pointed out today. Take a listen.
A lot of those that are pushing this are online and I think are under the impression that a Democrat in Kentucky might be able to win that election. It's been since 1992 that we have had a Democratic senator in Kentucky. A vacancy, not having Mitch McConnell show up isn't necessarily a bad thing.
So, there is a degree in sheer partisan terms that this does hamstring an already thin Republican majority.
Governor Bashir is being so honest. Another governor might sort of dance around that, and I so appreciate it. But the people who are calling for him to do more, he's not a grandstander. He shouldn't be. He knows what the law is. And by the way, the law in Kentucky is extremely confusing, as I'm sure you know, because the Constitution says, right, the governor appoints, but a law passed said, no, the governor doesn't appoint, and it is a Republican state. So it's, be careful what you wish for on either side. But the point is, it's bigger than Mitch McConnell. I know that everyone's focused here, but it's about the Senate. It's about the House. They had a woman, a congresswoman, who was in a nursing home for months. She got paid. She had dementia.
Yes.
This is, I'm not a comedian, but, leads itself into that direction. And when Congressman King came back, frankly, I thought he missed the mark. He should have apologized. He didn't apologize. And so I think the rules have to change. People aren't going to stand for it.
I think you're probably right about that. We're going to see how this continues to play out. Barbara Boxer, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.
Still ahead, a Republican congressman accused of just unspeakable acts. Why is Max Miller still a member of Congress? That's next. Caucus has a lot of powerful, scandal-ridden figures. The member with possibly the most serious allegations swirling around him is also one of the least known. The pressure is now building on Ohio Congressman Max Miller. This month, Mother Jones magazine obtained 2,000 pages of court filings and police reports related to Miller. Records detailing allegations of drug use by Miller, misogyny and verbal abuse, and violent behavior against multiple women, including his ex-wife, Emily Moreno. She's the daughter of Ohio Republican Senator Bernie Moreno. Last February, the documents show, Moreno took her and Miller's 2-year-old daughter to the ER with a broken collarbone. According to Mother Jones, police records show that Moreno told detectives that Miller had previously thrown hot water at her, shoved her, and held a gun to her head. Therefore, she couldn't rule out that Miller caused their daughter's fracture. A child protection specialist reviewing the case said the bruising around the fracture resembled a handprint. Moreno never filed a police report. Miller said the bruises might have come from a seatbelt. The investigation found insufficient evidence of a crime. But Moreno did tell detectives something she said her daughter told her, quote, "Daddy's house is scary." A spokesman for Miller referred Mother Jones to previous statements denying Miller has ever committed violence against women. Moreno's lawyer declined Mother Jones' request for comment. Now, Miller has represented Ohio's heavily Republican 7th District since 2023, after first holding several jobs in Donald Trump's first administration. Trump called him a great guy, supported his campaign for Congress. But multiple sources at the time told Politico that Miller's prior romantic relationship with former Trump press secretary Stephanie Grisham, remember her, ended when he pushed her against a wall and slapped her in the face in his Washington apartment. Miller denies those allegations. But in a column for the Washington Post, Grisham wrote that she had told Donald and Melania Trump she was abused by a fellow White House staffer and they didn't act on the information. To the contrary, she wrote in this column, knowing what he knows, Trump has endorsed my ex's bid for Congress. Now, as Miller runs for re-election, Republican lawmakers remain largely silent about these shocking allegations of violence. Nikki McCann Ramirez is a politics reporter at Rolling Stone, who took a look at this week at how Republicans are sidestepping questions about Miller's alleged conduct, and she joined me now. I got to say, I want to be very careful about what is and isn't established here. What are allegations? Again, he denies ever being violent towards women. But just to start on the last thing I said was Stephanie Grisham part, where, just to start with, you have essentially, she doesn't say his name, but she points the arrows at him. You have a former staffer who is on the record saying that she was abused and that she told Donald and Melania Trump about it and they did nothing and instead endorsed it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that even though these are allegations, Max Miller kind of identified himself as the person Grisham was talking about in that memoir by countersuing. And later, now in the current dispute he's in with his ex-wife, once again, bringing up the claims made by Grisham and alleging that he had evidence that it had been made up. But I really want to stress, and I encourage everyone to read the Mother Jones piece, which is incredibly in-depth. These are not just allegations dating back to Grisham. The piece establishes a pattern of accusations dating back to when Miller was in high school. This is a very established figure and a very established problem that this member of Congress has had, not just in the last couple months, but over the last few years. As these allegations resurface and regain traction in the context of this race, there is now a clip circulating of fellow disgraced Congressman George Santos telling him on the floor of the House, "You're a wife beater." So again, allegedly, but in that instance, it was a bit of, the fraudster calling the kettle an abuser. But it seems like Republicans throughout the caucus have known for years that these allegations are out there and have kind of chosen to ignore them. Because as of now, there is no active ethics committee investigation. There is no real response from leadership about why this person has been allowed to remain a voting member of the caucus when other members have been removed for similar allegations.
I also just want to emphasize the other allegations coming from his ex-wife. First of all, this is not that it should matter either way, but this is the wife of a sitting Republican senator in the same state of Ohio, right? It's a fairly connected person. And the context of those police reports, this is not her talking to a reporter. It's not her making public. This is a private conversation she is having with the police when she is in the context of bringing her daughter with a broken collarbone to the hospital, in which she says that he pointed a gun at her head, threw her into a wall, and threw hot water on her. That, again, it doesn't mean it's true. These are allegations, but this is in a context in which this is not a person who is, attempting to destroy the reputation or publicly coming out with this. This is in the sort of most private, urgent possible context.
Absolutely. And especially when there's a child in the mix that is at risk. And I think the response House Majority Leader Mike Johnson gave last week was incredibly instructive, because we've seen Johnson in the past sort of deflect to questions about allegations related to members of his caucus by simply saying, "Oh, I haven't heard of that." As we were just discussing, this is something that is very well known within the Republican House caucus. Johnson essentially dismissed these reports by saying, "Oh, well, they're allegations." We've seen over the course of the last year 2 members of the Republican House caucus be removed not via criminal convictions, but allegations of misconduct. Most recently, Tony Gonzalez, and then, of course, Matt Gaetz, a very infamous case.
Yep.
I think the thing here that we need to remember is that members of Congress are not entitled to their seats. The conduct you display in your home, allegedly to your ex-wife, to your children, that is not separate from your ability to serve in Congress. If you are allegedly committing abuse at home, especially within a party that claims to value the safety of women, children, and girls, and this is a story that is hanging over your head, it's not only that you're accountable to the voters that are going to cast their ballots in November in the midterms, you are accountable to the fellow members of your Congress, to your family, to the people who you have misled through your character.
I want to note, obviously, I misspoke before. It says his daughter, Emily Marino's daughter, not wife. I think I misspoke briefly. I want to just play what Mike Johnson said, because you've been reporting about the sort of sidestepping here, which I think is pretty disingenuous. Yeah. Johnson was confronted with this after the sort of Plattner story, and there's been some really upsetting abuse allegations at Corey Mills, who you're going to hear about here in this clip, just to set it up. He's a Republican in Florida. He denies those allegations. He's also faced them. But take a listen to how Johnson tries to get out of it here.
These past 2 weeks, Democrats ditched Graham Platter from their ballot after sexual assault allegations. 2 members of your conference, Max Miller and Corey Mills, faced domestic violence allegations. Why do Republicans keep them in the conference, whereas Democrats are dropping somebody critically accused of sexual harassment?
Well, the key word there is allegation. We have a process here. The House Ethics Committee works on those things. If allegations are made, they work through a process. So I'm not in the business of commenting on an investigation.